This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It is Monday, January 6th, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host, along with my son, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. I'd like to just welcome everyone today. I want to say today's broadcast, today's edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report is being brought to you by a very, very special sponsor, a new sponsor, actually. It's Audible.com. Folks, today's broadcast is brought to you by Audible.com, where you can get a free audiobook download at www.audibletrial.com/Hagmann. And, of course, that /Hagmann is important, where over 100,000 titles to choose from are available for your iPhone, your Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. More about that later in the program. Folks, we're proud to bring you a program where we provide news in 3D. We look beyond the news headlines, beyond the bylines, beyond the fog of disinformation to bring you the news behind the news. For those new listeners, and we have many, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find us on the Internet. Our home base is HomelandSecurityUS.com. We're also simulcast by the good graces of the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune us in at the Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. You got to spell it all out. The word "and" even. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your belief and your trust in us as we walk through this minefield of current events together, and it's truly a minefield. Joe, good evening, and glad you made it to the studio, sled dogs and all.
Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to travel through this polar vortex, or what it's being called. Had an interesting weekend learning about some new weather language and vocabulary words. I guess we have, I don't know if you heard about this, the frostquakes. Did you get a chance to hear about those?
Well,
I thought it was a new cereal when I read the article.
That's a good one, by the way.
And
we're supposed to have thunder snow tonight. But
yeah,
frostquakes?
Frostquakes and polar vortexes.
Okay,
what's going on? I learned about this weekend. And we have some crazy weather. Really, all it is just some crazy weather. But what they're saying, a polar vortex, and much of the Northeast, Midwest and Northeast region is going through this really viciously cold weather that we are having here. But RT, I saw over the weekend, I saw this polar vortex clip play on RT, and it talks about a portion of the polar vortex. They say is a megastorm that's expected to bring record low temperatures across much of the Northeast, Midwest, and Northeast region. We know the wind chills are anywhere from, it's minus 28 here now with the wind chill, and in Chicago it was up the minus 48 earlier today, I think.
I can tell you this, it's darn cold.
Yeah, but this polar vortex, I don't know, have you ever heard this term?
No.
Okay, because I haven't either, and they say it's a dense pool of counterclockwise rotating air that comes down from the North Pole. It's like Santa Claus. It comes from the North Pole. This hurricane-type system just sits over like a cold front, and then I guess it's going to go back up to the North Pole when it's done, and this is what meteorologists have termed polar vortex. Now, I didn't do any research on the definition of the word or history of it, but this is what they're calling it, and basically it's a word for extremely cold weather that you get, once a decade, once in a while. I don't know. But the frostquakes, we're going to get into that.
You're going to have to talk to me about frostquakes. This does affect a large portion of the United States, what's taking place right now in Canada as well, because we've gotten so many emails about this. And I want to thank you, Barbara, for sending me your email as well. We are going to have Scott Stevens on Wednesday, the first couple of hours. And you recall he was on our show earlier, last year, talking about weather patterns. And, of course, he's a meteorologist, and he's going to explain what's going on. And I think that we can conclude what's taking place with the weather patterns is somewhat unusual, to say the least. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Not at all. Not unusual at all.
Not unusual?
No, not for the times we live in.
Oh, for the times in which we live. Okay.
But it is strange. I mean, we're seeing everything else change, the weather, the natural disaster intensities, the the frequency of these storms, these natural disasters, these human-made disasters.
Right.
And this is par for the course. The only thing, I'm surprised we don't have more. I'm surprised, this polar vortex didn't expand to the equator. Why not? But it is a serious situation. There's been 16 people that are reported dead over the areas, different states that have been affected by this. And there is something going on. Now, the frostquakes is what I'm getting into next.
Let me ask you before you move from the polar vortex, could this be from, we'll say, something like HAARP? Does HAARP have enough energy behind it to create something like this? Or
I don't know if it is HAARP. I don't know enough about what HAARP does. I know just a tad bit. I don't know how much it can really affect the weather like this. If it has the ability to actually pull, the atmosphere down from the North Pole to the U.S. and bring this cold weather. But I do know that it can have effects. I know that on Saturday I got a call from our friend in Western New York who talked about the unusual amount of chemtrails in the sky. And when I went out to look for myself, it was real cloudy here, but towards sunset there was a break in the clouds and you could see the amount of chemtrails in the sky.
I did notice that earlier today, and I will say this, in addition to the weather, now this polar vortex, and people might be saying, well, what are you talking about weather for? Because it's really not, is this really newsworthy? Well, it is if we look at this, to me, at least in a larger context. We also have NASA talking about chances of an incoming coronal mass ejection. They're now giving, it's almost like listening to a weather forecast. They're saying there's I think what did they say, a 30% chance? Let me just double check here, of some sort of coronal mass ejection hitting the Earth. It's almost like listening to a weather forecast.
The CME from the sunspot.
Yeah.
They have a huge sunspot facing us right now.
Correct. And the weather, and NASA is reporting solar storm, CME, 30% chance of an X-flare.
X-flare is the highest type of solar flare.
Right.
And it is incoming CME from an M4 class flare from AR 1944.
But see, I don't ever remember NASA ever providing information about solar flares as if they were giving a weather forecast.
Right. And maybe this could be because we're in a solar max year, as Stan pointed out. I think we're in a solar max year. This is something special about the solar maximum year we're in. I know that on Jesse Ventura's show he did a while back, they talked about the weakening magnetosphere.
Correct.
Being something new with the CMEs that we're getting and the sunspots that we're getting. Now, we've had, in 2009, if you go to spaceweather.com, on the left-hand side, they talk about what the sunspots are and how many sunspots we had each day, or each year, how many spotless days we had. I'm sorry. In 2009, we had 260 days with no sunspots.
Right.
2010, we had 51. 2011, we had 2. And that was the last time we had a year. 2011 was last year we had a day without sunspots facing us.
Okay, all right.
On a daily basis.
Well,
so we're in a solar max where these are expected, and maybe the increase in people's awareness and want for this information could have led to NASA's reporting on it, or
perhaps
it could be something else.
Well, the Weather Channel, and again, thank you, Barbara, for putting together the email that you did. The Weather Channel is named the latest storm Ion. I find that very interesting as well, especially since NASA is reporting about this very powerful solar storms and with a 30% chance of an X-class heading towards Earth through January 7th. Now, I do know that Before It's News has had quite a few articles concerning the weather, and perhaps the man-made influence of this. Look, it's just odd. The whole thing is odd. Could this be perhaps a setup for something else? I don't know. I don't know. And of course, naming the winter storms now Hercules.
I talked to several people about that over the weekend. they were asking me, do we have named winter storms previous years? And I was talking with a few of them, and they never remembered having named storms. And I said, last year was the first year I remember winter storms being named.
Well, with all of this information, this is why we asked Scott Stevens to come back on. Of course, he once again he's a experienced meteorologist. He can explain what's going on to those of us here in North America, and this weather as well extends all across Europe and different weather patterns affecting different parts of the world. So wherever you're at, this will apply to you. And that's Wednesday from the beginning of our show forward. He's agreed to come on. And tonight, by the way, moving forward a little bit, at the bottom of this hour,
in 20 minutes, roughly.
20 minutes, right. We're going to have Dave Hodges join us. Rather a last minute. He's very graciously agreed to come on at the last minute to talk about his updates. He's been busy filing some updates, and he's going to talk about what he's been hearing lately with respect to the condition of the planet, the world, the potential for false flags. And, of course, we need to get into what exactly is taking place in Iraq, thank you, and Syria. Of course, Kerry had just gone over there and said some things. Folks, we're seeing from our intelligence analyst, and no one is reporting on this, just to kind of give you a thumbnail sketch. What we're seeing here is not Plan A, not Plan B, not Plan C or D or E, but perhaps Plan F on the takedown of Syria. They couldn't do it via Benghazi. They didn't do it because the new media said, hey, look, and exposed the plans. Now, with Kerry's in the U.S., this hands-off approach of the radical elements, the terrorists in Anbar province in Iraq, the very same people who fought against our troops in Fallujah and killed many. They, of course, are now regrouping and opening up a new front against Syria with the imprimatur, perhaps, of John Kerry and Barack Hussein Obama. Everyone has wondered, well, why did Barack Obama receive a Nobel Peace Prize? Well, you're seeing it unfold right now, because the end result is going to be something, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to affect all of us. I don't care what part of the planet you're listening to this from. What's going to happen here is a Palestinian state will be established at great expense. The Palestinian state will be established at great expense. Assad will be taken out.
Think of the timing of this peace deal. Remember we talked about the blood moons the next couple of years? 2 this year, 2 next year.
Correct.
Falling on
Correct.
That.
Yes.
I watched an interesting video today, and I was here in the studio going through different things. I watched a few Pastor Begley's video. He had one on Ariel Sharon, and it's a prophecy from a rabbi there. And then there was another video I stumbled upon where I'll have to find the link, but it gets into the time periods of the media talking about this 2-state solution, the Kerry going over there to promote the peace, and how the dates sync up. It's very interesting. I'll have to find it because I can't do any justice by explaining it. I only watched it once. But yeah, we're in some very interesting times. We're in biblical times. And what we're seeing happen is biblical things happening. We're seeing signs left and right being given to us, red flags, warning signals that we need to be paying attention to.
Folks, you're listening to this before I write, and I'm going to be writing a report on what our intelligence source had stated to us. Of course, Kerry worked out a deal behind the scenes, and for those in the know, of course, there was a meeting at the Pentagon on New Year's Day. But look, Kerry worked a deal behind the scenes with Saudi Arabia and with Israel. Kind of strange bedfellows, no? Well, anyway, Israel, you want peace? You're going to need to establish, or you're going to need to allow some land to be given up and a Palestinian state established. Saudi Arabia as well work a deal with Saudi Arabia to establish a Palestinian state. The U.S. is going to back off the fighters from the Anbar province, which will be retaken by the terrorists, and a new front against Syria will be open. This is what's taking place right now. The price for peace for Israel comes at a very great cost. They want Assad. They want Assad out because of the chemical weapons factor. Now, for right or wrong, for better or worse, that's what they want. Saudi Arabia, get Assad out. Take out Assad through Iraq. They're opening a front through Iraq. Folks, understand this. If you look at a map, and I would urge everyone to do this, because, once again, I'll be writing about this, but if you look at the map and look at Syria, look at the nation of Syria, look at the nation of Iraq, and of course the Anbar province lies in the westernmost portion of Iraq. That Anbar province is filling up with the most deadliest, the most fiercest of Al-Qaeda, the groups related to Al-Qaeda.
We have an audio report on this.
Why don't we play that now?
Okay. It's called Bombs, Blood, and Brutality, Iraq, Endless War Zone as Militants Capture Fallujah.
Take a
A new wave of bombings has ripped through the commercial districts of the Iraqi capital, killing at least 20 people. That's as the country's bloodless army could be preparing to attack and recapture Fallujah after an al-Qaeda-linked group gained foothold there. Let's get more now from artiste Paula Sleer. She joins us live. So, Paula, what steps is Baghdad taking to retake Fallujah?
Well, Islamic elements with al-Qaeda links have overrun the Iraqi cities of Fallujah and Ramadi, and thousands of residents are fleeing these areas as government forces launch airstrikes and fire artillery shells. The Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki has vowed that government forces will not leave this area until all these extremist elements are, to quote him, eliminated. But he does admit that for now the government has lost control in these cities. In recent days, the militants received a boost as they were joined in their fight against the Baghdad government by Sunni tribesmen. And what is interesting is that it marks a change from the years prior to the U.S. withdrawal, when major Sunni tribes turned against al-Qaeda. What we're witnessing now is that they're joining forces with these al-Qaeda groups against the Shiite-led government. Now, the American administration has been slammed for creating this situation. There are many who predicted that once the U.S. forces withdrew from Iraq, there would be a vacuum that would be created and that this would be filled with extremist elements. The U.S. Secretary of State, John Kerry, has promised support for the Baghdad government, but he has ruled out the possibility of boots on the ground. He has said that the U.S. would not send troops back to that country. To quote Kerry, he says that this fight is the fight of the Baghdad government.
Artiste Paula Sleer reporting live on these latest developments coming out of Iraq and the violence going on across the country. Thanks, Paula. Well, Adam Kokesh fought in Fallujah during the U.S.-led campaign. He thinks that the dire security situation was the inevitable result.
I've come a long way since my time in Fallujah in 2004, and been able to step back, and I've been involved in a lot of various efforts here in the United States to help fellow veterans out with PTSD and things like that. So it's incredible to see that a lot of the predictions that those of us who understood what the war was about at least figured it out when we got home, coming true now. Because when you understand the nature of war as a racket, you understand the true motivations behind the United States invasion and occupation. When you understand what kind of puppet government was installed in Iraq, you understand that it was really only a matter of time before this happened.
Iraqi lawyer Sabah al-Mukhtar says the country's prime minister and his cabinet have completely failed to save the country from ruin.
He hasn't been able to stop the terrorist acts which has been taking the lives of the civilians in Baghdad. He is now accusing the Qaeda, which is somewhere else, that being the one who is causing it. The government in Baghdad is totally incapable of controlling even Baghdad itself, except that the people there are being put in very tight spots because the government is allowing people to go around beating anybody who comes out in the street or even raising their voices. This is really a tragedy, but the problem is not there. The problem is that the government of the world and the international media seems to swallow this idea that somehow what is happening is that this is a fight against Al-Qaeda, when in fact it isn't.
On our website, we're running a project dedicated to keeping tally of the violence in Iraq, especially the human cost.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that last part was.
Yeah, off air, we were when the person chimed in saying this isn't a war against Al-Qaeda. I said, "What is it? What's that? Where'd that come from?"
Well,
the whole clip was about how Al-Qaeda was
right
surging in the area, and maybe there's other things going on here that we just don't see or aren't in these short reports.
Yeah, but I think, Joe, and I think this is important because we needed guidance on this, and which is why we relied on our source from inside the intelligence world. We needed guidance as to what was going on. Basically, John Kerry just said, look, he telegraphed to the terrorists in Anbar province in Iraq and their associate groups, the proxy groups that are forming, that go ahead, and we're not going to fight you. We're not going to put up any military resistance against you. So go ahead and open up another front to take down Assad. And of course, Kerry went over to Israel, said, "You want peace? You're going to have to allow for this caliphate, this Palestinian state, and therefore a caliphate to be established and coexist peaceably with you. And to Saudi Arabia, you're going to have to just let this go and turn the other way." Well, Russia knows exactly what's going on. Russia knows that this is a continuation of Benghazi. When Benghazi failed, when the attacks, the arming of the Free Syrian Army, the terrorists there, and by the way, the FSA, as it stands, they're pretty much blown apart. They're useless. They've been rendered useless, more or less, and that's because, think Bay of Pigs, for those old enough to remember, when the freedom fighters went into Cuba via Bay of Pigs to take out Castro. They expected U.S. help. Same kind of mentality. The people trying to take down Assad expected U.S. military help, or at least NATO help through an air cap and other means. They didn't get it. Why didn't they get it? Because we and other people in the new media said, "Hey, look, this is what's going on. This is engaging Russia." Now, folks, I understand that. Please, I understand how confusing this is. This is chess at three levels, and it's hard for me to keep all of the players straight without a scorecard. And after speaking with our intelligence source, I'll be writing a report as succinctly as I can. Check in HomelandSecurityUS.com and perhaps CanadaFreePress.com. I believe that to be the case tomorrow, and you'll have a good idea of exactly what's going on. And no one is talking about this, at least not in this fashion. This is the continuation of a proxy war. This is engaging Russia. This is establishing, down the road, this will assist in the establishment of the 10 power centers.
Well, what they're doing is destabilizing the region because they didn't get what they wanted as fast as they wanted in Syria. So they're destabilizing the neighboring regions, just like they did with Libya and with the other North African, Middle Eastern countries that they overthrew with their proxy wars. And this is all going to lead to when you have every single country, as the Bible states, that is around Israel in chaos and civil war, there is going to have to be some remarkable agenda group of people who step in and say, we must have peace, which, yes, we do need to have a peace, but not the peace that they're offering.
Exactly. And we are seeing biblical, this is pure biblical prophecy setting up. And, of course, we're getting out of the way. Just imagine, remember in Libya, for example, there were, 24 troop carriers, various things that went missing. Incredible, since every square inch and every plot of sand in Libya is in some way, shape, or form under surveillance, whether it be by satellite, by drone, or whatever. So we knew exactly where those military assets went. But as the United States leaves and has left, and El Anbar province is now being overtaken once again by these proxy groups fighting. This will open up a new front to go after Assad, to topple Assad. What's taking place is this entirely new front, Syria from the southeast. It's the eastern side of Syria. And I'll say this, the Russians will respond to this blowback. The Russians know exactly what's taking place. The Russians, Putin's got Obama's number. He's going to up the ante on this. Why not take this all the way to the Strait of Hormuz, perhaps? And remember us talking about the dollar, how this is a war against the United States currency, the U.S. dollar. Well, remember us talking about the dollar being contingent as a relevant currency on the free flow of oil? You cut the flow of oil, you stop the need for the U.S. dollar, oil to be exchanged in U.S. dollars, as we're seeing taking place anyway, but this will hasten that deal, especially if there's an incident in the Strait of Hormuz by Iran, or really by the Russians, but through proxies. And John Kerry and Obama saying, hey, we didn't, we couldn't have predicted this. Folks, we're being set up. All of us, we're being set up. This whole thing is being orchestrated to create this caliphate, to create this Palestinian state, this false peace, to create the 10 power centers globally with one guy in charge. We know who that guy is. We might think, well, wait a minute, why didn't we start there or why didn't they start there? Or perhaps the Saudis, why wasn't the attack against Syria, against Assad, started there in that particular area from the Anbar province? Well, the blowback could have been very high, and of course, that was not cool. So it's going to look like this was all just one big cosmic accident, when in fact it's being set up by Obama, by Kerry. The result will be a Palestinian state, a false peace. This is what Obama has been awarded his Peace Prize for.
So he was given it early, knowing what he was going to accomplish.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
We're going to take a short break here, folks. We're going to get Dave Hodges on the line. We're going to hear from Dave Hodges, hear what he's got to say about the various false flag attacks. Also, we understand that his broadcast was interrupted yesterday by some interference.
Yeah, this was some people. I got an email or two about it, and then some people in the chat room are continuing to talk about it. And I tried to, during the show here, I just went on iTunes, tried to download the episode from last night, and it did not. Nothing came up to download, so we'll have to ask him about that. But what we're going to do is go to a commercial break, and we'll get Dave Hodges on the line, and we'll come right back after the short messages with Dave Hodges.
Yeah. We have it.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of News in 2 Minutes, bringing you the news that you need to know. Let's begin. Following widespread cases of both the bubonic and highly contagious and often deadly pneumonic plague that struck Madagascar in late December, previously unreported cases of pneumonic plague, which has a mortality rating of up to 95% in untreated victims, have been reported in Peru. International health officials are warning residents and travelers that pneumonic plague can spread easily throughout small towns and villages, where it is contracted through the inhalation of aerosolized plague bacteria, and that if it is left unchecked, could be the cause of a global health scare and international condition. In other health news, Taiwan has issued a travel alert for the most populated city in China after officials in Shanghai confirmed a new case of the H7N9 variation of the avian flu. Chinese health officials are continuing to urge the public to be cautious of the multiple variations of the avian flu that have crossed the species barrier, which made them able to infect humans, and warn that anyone suspected of contracting the disease should seek medical attention and antiviral medication immediately. Ongoing gun battles are said to be increasing in South Sudan as leaders of both the administration and the opposition party meet to discuss terms of peace. Locals are reporting that they fear peace may never be possible after a violent coup attempt caused ethnic and sectarian targeting and sent residents fleeing to refugee camps amid a growing civil divide. NOAA forecasters are reporting that the chance for strong solar flaring is heightened today, as researchers confirmed that a slow-erupting M4.0 solar flare erupted around the sunspots 1943 and 1944 and was witnessed in conjunction with a radio burst. A strong system of cold weather is expected to descend across most of North America this week, closing affected schools and businesses in some areas, and leaving residents to prepare for power outages and prolonged periods of slow emergency response times. While the price of gold rose to a 2-week high, other commodities such as copper and oil fell this week, as economists carefully watch weak economic data coming out of China, while the citizens of the U.S. and other nations continue to suffer from a deepening global economic crisis. And to wrap things up, a measles outbreak is being reported in the capital of the Philippines as the country continues to struggle for survival after Typhoon Haiyan. Multiple agencies are reporting an ongoing cluster of tremors around Oklahoma. Anti-government attacks are increasing in Turkey as a number of diplomatic vehicles are reported to have been broken into and lit on fire. And a 5.3 in Colombia, followed by a 5.1 in Russia, completes today's Quake Watch. And that's it for this episode of News in 2 Minutes. We'll resume normal scheduling on the 21st for more news that the aware need the most.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Welcome back, folks. You're listening to the Hagmann and the Hagmann Report on this, the 6th day of January 2014. If you're noticing a new program clock, we're trying to adjust to that. We have to get everyone on board that does a simulcast broadcast our show. It's rather interesting. Let me take this opportunity just to mention this, folks, before we bring Mr. Hodges on. Mr. Hodges, by the way, has been gracious enough to come on our program tonight and give us an update of things. Of course, Mr. Hodges, host of the Common Sense Show, and of course, the CommonSenseShow.com is home base. But let me open with this. Folks, you've heard me talk about various books, and it seems like I'm always talking about books. Well, it was very interesting. This Christmas, we purchased from Audible.com, we purchased a gift for one of our friends who is extremely ill. And my wife had talked to this person. In fact, visited this person today just to make sure that she was all right. And she was in tears. And my wife said, why she was in tears was because she, up until this past Christmas, she was unable to read a book. And she was still can't turn the pages because of her condition. Well, Audible.com solves all of that. If you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, there is a graphic on the right-hand side. It's Audible. You just click on that. I got to tell you something. Not only are they our new sponsors, but they've offered listeners of our program a free trial. You can get a free audiobook download at www.audibletrial.com/Hagmann. You've got to use that. You've got to use that address or that URL. So that's why I'm directing everyone to HomelandSecurityUS.com. Look on the right and you'll see an icon there. Click on that. But folks, for the listeners of our program, There's over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone. I don't care what you've got, what you use, whether it's the iPad, iPhone. It doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know the difference personally. But I'll tell you what. They've got books via audio or on audio. You can listen to the books, and you don't have to turn a page. It's great. There are brand new sponsors, and I'm so proud to have them sponsoring our program. It's audibletrial.com/Hagmann, or go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, click on the link there. You get, this is so new here, I believe you get a 30-day trial, and this is a wonderful opportunity to check out their service. So you can multitask while listening to your audiobooks. I just wanted to mention that because we may not have a chance to mention it again, but it's a brand new sponsor, and I'm so proud that they've allowed us to sponsor them, or they're sponsoring our program. It's a fantastic gift. It's a fantastic service. If you're busy, you want to listen to books on the road, and they've got a ton of titles, over 100,000 titles. So definitely check that out. I'm 100%. I'm a customer. I am. I don't have time to read books all the time, so this does help me out. So that's www.audibletrial.com/Hagmann, or go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, click on the icon, and enjoy your free month. With that, Mr. Hodges is one of the most sought-after guests that we have. I must have gotten, 24 emails this weekend asking for Mr. Hodges to come on and talk about what he's seeing right now, what's going on. And, of course, folks, you can go visit his website, thecommonsenseshow.com, and check out his latest. With that, Mr. Hodges, welcome to the program. Thanks for bearing with me today.
Well, hi, Doug, and hi, Joe, and thanks for having me on. I'm really glad to be back.
It's great to have you, Mr. Hodges. Right out of the gate, I just want to ask you this question. Did you have problems with your broadcast last night?
We lost, we had Deborah Tavares, terrific guest, and we lost her for about 5 minutes.
Okay, because I did get a few emails of people saying that there was interference and also that the archive was not available through iTunes, and I tried to download the archive through iTunes just recently here during the show, and no episode popped up. So just wanted to keep you aware of that, let you know that we were getting emails about that, and that happens.
I will look into that. Too. In fact, I actually have plans before I go to bed tonight to put the interview up on my website. I've had one of those days, gentlemen. This is literally the first time I've got to sit down today. But I will attend to this archive issue because I bet if I open my emails, I'm going to find a lot of people saying the same thing. If you post those archives late, people let you know.
Oh, we're quite aware of that, boy, I'll tell you. Well, I'm glad you're sitting down because that means you're comfortable. You can fill us in on the latest. What's the latest? What's on your radar? What's going on, Dave?
Well, I think the Obamanites and the people they represent are in somewhat of a holding pattern because they have been stifled at every turn. My military sources match a lot of what Dr. Jim Garrow is saying, in that the military has been successful in thwarting Obama's false flag attempts. He's not able to get his hands on rogue nuclear missiles at this time. In fact, actually, some of these missiles are being held in abeyance by members of our military. One of the things that has crossed my desk as of a week ago, and I just received another confirmation on this on Saturday, is that the nuclear submarine commanders, I understand, have changed their protocols because they were fearful that members of the Obama administration had given them up to the Russians and the Chinese in case of a potential conflict. And also what I was told in the same conversation, and I've raised this question on my website, if this country degenerates into a civil war or massive civil unrest, what will become of the 200,000 troops that we have stationed overseas, particularly the 68,000 combat troops in Afghanistan? And the short answer is that they're stranded. And the other ray of hope that these people can latch onto is I'm reasonably sure from the information I'm getting that these submarine commanders have pledged support for the 68,000 troops in Afghanistan by the use of their nuclear missiles. So this is getting really serious. I gave a talk on Saturday morning at something called the Arizona Breakfast Club, and it's a great, great activist organization led by Ernie Hancock and the Freedom's Phoenix people. And in there, I told people that I don't see how we're not going to have a civil war. You've got Obama, who's fired over 200 military command level officers. You've got submarine commanders basically giving the big middle finger to Obama with regard to not giving up the nuclear launch codes. You've got reports that the people that are running the nuclear arsenal domestically are not cooperating with the Obama administration. This is why he's continuing to fire people in that venue. He's fired the 3 top commanders of our nuclear arsenal, and he's working his way through even more as we speak. So there's a real bifurcation that's taken place. And I think it all spells one thing, and I'd like to compare notes with you guys tonight. I think it spells civil war might not be that far off.
You know, Dave, I've been hearing this a lot. I've been hearing that they're spoiling for a fight. When I say they, I'm talking about the people within the criminal element within the government. They're spoiling for a fight. They want to cause conflict. And, of course, we've said this all along, where they're looking for a reason to implement martial law here in this country. They're looking for a reason to crack down on the to take away our guns. They're looking for any reason to exert their power and influence and subjugate the Constitution. And you know, there are so many ways right now that they can accomplish this. Yes, we've had unconfirmed, I guess that's the best way to describe it, unconfirmed reports that they are preparing for conflict. And well beyond the bullets that we've heard of, the ammunition that we heard of, well beyond the federalization of the local police departments, our sources have been saying, look, not only are they doing it overtly there, but what they're doing is they're rattling the cages within the social network sites, within the social networking platforms, to create this disturbances, multiple, I suppose, that would cause people to lash out. Now, I guess I'm going to throw the question back at you. Number one, does that make sense? And number two, are we falling into any kind of a trap if this is their desire?
Well, I think we see both sides that are itching for a fight. And I do think our military wants to move. What I've been told repeatedly is that the military is judging the temperature of the air with regard to the popular support they think they'll enjoy from the people. And this is what's holding them back. I was told last week that there would have already been a coup attempted against this administration had the people in charge of this planned action felt that the people would popularly support them. And they are not confident at this point that the people do support them. And that's why I want to make a plea to your audience, is that we need to educate people quickly, and we need to make the numbers grow. We need to express our outrage publicly in every kind of venue that we have available to us. In that will embolden the military to act on our behalf. But, Doug, I'm going to also give a disclaimer. I have the utmost respect for our military, and I know people like to sit back and take pot shots at them, but most of what they do that we don't like is forced upon them. We don't have to agree with their mission, but I don't dispute most of their loyalty to this government, to the country, to protecting us and their families. But we have a real problem right now, and the real problem is the apathy of the people. It's been said that the people to a revolution is like oxygen to air. That you got to have the people, and this is what's holding the military back. The other thing that concerns me as a disclaimer is, let's assume there is a military coup, and members of this administration, Pelosi, Feinstein, the whole kit and caboodle are marched off to prison. How many times have we ever seen a coup take place and everything went back to being a republic form of democracy? I can't think of one instance in history. It scares me that we could have a military coup or we could have a civil war, because what we could be doing is replacing one dictatorship with another.
Exactly. And I've got to say this. I read your January 5th, yesterday's posting on your website. Folks, you can go to thecommonsenseshow.com. That's thecommonsenseshow.com. That's Dave Hodges' website. Would you prefer a civil war or World War III? I read that with great interest because you write that we're on a collision course, America is, with a brutal civil war. And you go on to state that we can argue if the coming civil war is going to be a conventional type of civil war or a guerrilla war. Now, and I think everyone listening to this broadcast, even those outside of the country, believe that we have reached the point as a country of no return and that civil strife is unavoidable. There's no argument from me. So what do you see taking place? Because you do bring up some good points here. You see that, you write, if a civil war is not inevitable, then explain how the military and this administration are going to get past the fact that this, quote, false flag president, end quote, has fired over 200-plus military command officers. Take it from there. What else here? How is this being set up?
You just encapsulated, Doug, the main issue here. The split between the administration and this military is irreparable. There's no way I can see that it can be fixed. And I wrote this in the article. It's not just the 200 military officers that have been fired by Obama that's really emblematic of this issue. It's the fact that these 200 commanders had subordinates who are loyal to them. They have company commanders who are loyal to them. They have relationships with members of the military-industrial complex. And what's interesting to me, too, if the military of the United States does not exist in its present form, what does that do to Lockheed Martin and all these other military-industrial companies? They've got to be really nervous about where this is headed, too. And I see the military-industrial complex siding with the military, just for no other reason than it's for their own financial survival.
Okay.
So we could start stacking up the list. I said this to Jim Garrow when he came on my show. I said, Jim, this is the way I see it. We have the Russians and the Chinese here training. They're going to be in the RIMPAC war games, which is unprecedented. In fact, you know what the RIMPAC war games are for? They're for to practice against the Chinese and the Russians' tactics in the Pacific. Instead, we've invited them in. What that makes them, Doug, is an international peacekeeping force. And at the moment that this hit me, it hit me like an epiphany. I realized at that moment that the Small Arms Treaty from the UN comes into play. That treaty calls for host nations to use foreign troops to do gun confiscations. I think that's what the RIMPAC games are going to train for. I think this is the consolidation of forces on the part of the Obama administration. I mean, really, they're bringing in the Russians and the Chinese to train fighting against the Russians and the Chinese. It doesn't make any sense. But as I was saying,
you're right.
It doesn't make any sense. So I look at it, well, what could be the next alternative? And clearly, to me, it's become an international peacekeeping force, and that should make all of us nervous. So on that premise, you've got the Russians and Chinese who are actively training on our soil, particularly the Russians. You've got any other blue-helmeted UN troops who could be brought in to assist the Obama administration. I've made the Canadians mad in the last week because I said Russians, Chinese, and Canadians on our soil. Well, I'm sorry, my friends in Canada, listen to me. I support you. I love your country. You've been a great neighbor. I love the Canadian lifestyle. I think Canadian people are very resolute people. But your prime minister in 2005, Martin, signed an agreement with George Bush that in case of insurrection, each other country would use the other country's military to put the insurrection down. And if there's a Canadian soldier on this soil or a Russian soldier on this soil, I don't care where they're from, if they raise a gun to an American's head, it's on. That's war, and that's when I'll get involved and I'll stop being a pacifist. This is serious stuff. So you're going to see the peacekeeping forces, in quotes, headed by DHS and other federal agencies, commanded by the Obama administration as the stooge for the New World Order, versus the American military, probably about 1.5 million veterans who are under the age of 35, and whatever other Americans choose to join them. And I do think eventually that this conflict will have to de-evolve into guerrilla warfare, long-term guerrilla warfare. This is why, let me just say this. I have a nice life. I'm sitting here in a nice house out here in the country, living a lifestyle I absolutely am in love with. I go to my day job. I like that. I don't want to see a civil war on my soil. But because I don't want it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I think I just told you what the sides of the Civil War are, and I think this is where this is headed. I think it's inevitable. It doesn't matter if Doug and Joe Hagmann and Dave Hodges say it's going to happen or not happen. I think the sides are already drawn.
Oh, man. Well, Dave, what you just said segues nicely into an email. Just received this from Dan R., who wants us to ask you this. Of course, he's read your website, our website. He listens to the show, as well as many other shows. He writes, number one, would succession, for example, succession of the states, be a first attempt prior to, a civil war or even a third world war that governors have to make known now? I mean, succession. What do you think about something like that? Like we know what's going on in the Pacific Northwest, where they're trying to make a separate state, and you and I spoke about that off air, or separate state. Are we going to see succession first, perhaps, or attempts thereof?
Well, we're seeing the birth pangs of it. You've got 17 counties in Northern California and Southern Oregon that are actually talking about forming a 51st state. Now, that's not going to go anywhere because they need congressional approval. 2 counties in California, Merced County and Siskiyou County, have already filed to remove themselves from California. And this comes directly from their county commissioners. I've done interviews on this. And so we're seeing the birth pains of this. Colorado, eastern Colorado, has a similar movement going on. But I think largely at the end of the day, and no offense to my friends in Northern California, I don't think these efforts are going to succeed. This ship has already sailed. This government is not going to let people live independently. They're not going to let people withdraw from the system. And in fact, let me illustrate what I mean by not withdraw from the system. In a place called Antelope Valley, which is on the fringes of L.A. County, they've been routinely being SWAT team raided there by what they call nuisance abatement teams, and they use these armored personnel carriers. They look like tanks, SWAT team gear, and it's for things like your weeds are too high or your front porch is 3 feet too long, and they're coming in and trying to force these people off their land. These people are not rich people. They're people of little means, and they live off the grid. You think that the Agenda 21 people would like these people because they live off the grid, but they want you in their system. They want to control you. They want you to have their energy devices that will only work with their smart meters. This is what they're after. They're not going to let people secede without a fight. This is 1861 all over again.
Wow. You're not painting a very pretty picture. Of course, we didn't ask you to. This is an assessment of the facts of what we see taking place. And Margot from Oklahoma writes in as well, and perhaps you can tell us how this fits in. We're seeing the Federal Reserve having their own police department, having their own weaponry. Of course, we're expecting an economic collapse, the attack, the killing off of the U.S. dollar. Where do you see that play into the mix, if you do?
Well, you even saw the National Weather Service purchase over 1 million rounds of ammunition last year. The federal government is gearing up for insurrection, and they know it's coming. And like I said, this is why the Russians are here. The reports of the Russians, and I've covered this quite a bit, but the reports on the Russians being here are undeniable.
We've seen that.
I don't want this to happen, Doug, and some people actually write to me on my website, and they're angry, and you're trying to ferment violence by fear-mongering. No, you know what I'd like to do? If I had my way, I know my son would have an economic future. He's 13 years old. I know that if he goes to college, it'll make a difference in his life. I miss college basketball coaching. I'd like to go back into that. I gave that up to do what I'm doing here. I'd like to go back living the life I was living 10 years ago before I became John McCain's victim. I don't want this to happen. But when I talk to enough people and the picture starts to clearly emerge, I'm not going to bury my head in the sand like so many of our fellow countrymen do who have cognitive dissonance and say this is not true. This is where we're at. We are at a very dangerous time in our country, because I also believe this, and this is why I titled the article I did, Civil War or World War III. Let's assume that we push this back. Let's say by some miracle of God that tomorrow morning 50 million Americans wake up and they hear everything that you and I are saying tonight, and they said, yeah, we're not going along with this. The Obama administration would be paralyzed to act against the people. And I don't care how many Russians they would have here. We could push this civil war back with awareness and standing up defiantly. But I also think we'd be inviting World War III. And if you want me to take a moment, I can tell you how I think the Obama administration's already planned for World War III.
You know, I would. That was going to be my next question. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, the fact that when submarine commanders have to change their protocols, their communication systems, what channels they're on, their navigation grid patterns, because they're afraid they've been given up by their commander-in-chief, I think that speaks volumes. But what's going on in Alaska, and I've been writing about this since September of 2012, Alaska has been completely compromised. Not only do we get reports of Russian soldiers inside smaller Alaskan towns like Ketchikan, Alaska, even in the larger towns like Fairbanks and Juneau, we have reports here that are undeniable. We used to have F-22 flights up and down the coast. And then the government came out and said, well, we can't fly those planes anymore because the oxygen uptake could make the pilots black out, and so they pulled the F-22s. Okay, I understand that. Why didn't they replace them with the F-16s that we still have in service? They didn't. I have Navy veterans on the Alaskan coast that contact me and say, we used to see our submarines patrolling the Alaskan coast, and they would be surfaced, and now we no longer see them. But we do see Russian submarines in the same areas. Obama gave away 7 key islands, and this is something I wrote about, and even though I included the documentation, a lot of people don't want to believe it, but it's undeniable. Obama, free of charge, gave away 7 Alaskan islands, 4 of which, if memory serves me correctly, are oil-rich, 3 of which would be important jumping-off points for a 3-pronged invasion of Alaska. So if you just look at the Alaskan theater, or as a potential theater, what we're seeing here is the Obama administration has set Alaska up to be conquered. And then, of course, Doug, and I know you have to know this, I've been told by multiple people in the intelligence agencies for years about the Chinese soldiers in the Sierra Madres, and they've gone unchallenged. And to me, that's unthinkable. And you go back, and President Kennedy risked World War III to take missiles out of Cuba, but we're going to let the Chinese take over the Panama Canal. We're going to let them hang out in the Sierra Madres in Mexico. We have been totally compromised. And since I've been on your show, and I talked about Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and I've had guests on my show from Gatlinburg, but I've got over 36 emails with reports of Russians. New Muslims are coming in. These Russians speak perfect English. They're all young. They're in great health, great shape, and they periodically disappear into the forest lands that are north of the town, and that is in the Great Smoky Mountains and in the National Forest, and they've closed it off to public access. And then they have helicopters coming in at night. I had Dr. Susan Hellman from Gatlinburg on my show, and she said that she lives next to a golf course, and the helicopters come in, and they offload stuff, and they yell at you to get back in your house. It's a staging area. It's a staging area for the invasion of the United States.
No, Dave, we've gotten a lot of reports. We've got a group, Hagmann's Heroes down there, who have reported multiple night flights, multiple flights of helicopters into the Smoky Mountains, sightings of Russian military personnel in that area. So I don't think, with all of these multiple reports, Dave, I really don't think that we can deny the presence. But let me ask you, what possible scenario could there be for the activation of these foreign troops? I mean, if barring a civil war scenario, or what would be the trigger event? I guess that's what I'm asking. What's the trigger event?
Well, I think that Obama's already been through 2 trigger events that failed. I am of the belief, from what I've been told, that Obama was going to launch or detonate nuclear weapons in American cities, and that was thwarted by the military. Then I was told that my original suspicion
by the
was
way,
the Grid X.
Dave, by the way, Jim Garrow had said the same thing on our program, and
Yes.
and I received a couple of emails saying, well, why didn't you have him expand upon that? Well, you expanded. I mean, you were on our show had said the very same thing. So the information, the intelligence you're getting is the same as Jim Garrow was saying, and so we're matching these puzzle pieces up. All right, that's an event that reportedly was thwarted. The nuking of the false flag attack. All right.
Well, let me just throw in some ancillary and corollary proof for this. Alex+Jones rightfully noted that there was at least one missing nuclear weapon from a base in Texas, and on the same exact day, Lindsey Graham came out and made a jackass out of himself by saying, if we don't hurry up and attack Syria, a nuclear bomb is going to be detonated in Charleston Harbor. Do you remember that?
Very well. And, of course, on the first, we had Dr. Garrow saying the same thing. Okay, yes, very well.
Well, I point to this, and I'm saying Lindsey Graham found out what was going to happen to his city, and he was saying, I'm not on board. That's why I think he was almost incoherent in that press conference. He acted like a 10-year-old kid before the cameras for the first time, and he was scared. And I think he was saying, no, you guys, I'll go along with you to a point here, Mr. New World Order, but I'm not going to let you nuke my city. And I think that's Graham, what we saw there.
And Graham, though, we must point out, is the guy that declared the entirety of the United States as a battlefield through legislation.
Yes.
All right. So, all right, that's one. Okay, now go ahead and continue.
Well, I think the second one, in September, right after Labor Day, I wrote a article as I started really looking at the Grid X2 drill, and I said this has all the false flag potential of the Boston bombing, 9/11, the 7/7 bombing, and so forth, where you have a drill and then the real thing happens. And I really thought in September that the Grid X2 drill was going to be a false flag event, and at least part of our power grid was going to be taken down, and martial law was going to be enacted. As we drew closer to the event, I even became more convinced in October as I discovered there were 10 FEMA DHS drills, all disaster drills, cyber terrorism, the whole thing, all going on at the same time. And I said, they're mobilizing. They're not doing drills. They're mobilizing for action. They want these people ready to spring into action. And then I heard, curiously, at the same time I got the reports about the Russians and Chinese being involved in the Grid X2 drills, the RIMPAC war games, then I heard about the Chinese and Russians being involved in the Grid X2. And then I started changing my mind. I said, well, they're not going to do a false flag if they've got foreign troops involved. They would bring them after the fact for martial law enforcement. So I backed off of my prediction, and I came out and said, I do not believe this is going to be a false flag. Well, I didn't know why. And then I had a conversation with a general that I've started to talk to fairly routinely, someone who was shown the door by this president. And what he told me was the military stopped it from happening. The plan was to have 2 ICBMs launched with 2 5-megaton nuclear missiles detonate over a specific area of the country to take down the majority of the power grid. Martial law would be enacted. A lot of the grid and military equipment used by the Obama administration would be protected in Faraday cage type of activities. That was thwarted by the military. And so we're on 2. I've got a third possibility that's out there now, too, if you'd like me to bring this up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Let me just say this, too. If you looked at the bulletin board in the Obama planners, they would probably have 10 false flags on the bulletin board. And they would probably have, well, this is our first option, then they'd have a second tier and a third tier and so forth. So if this doesn't work for whatever reason, we'll just move to this or move to that. But one of the things that I know is on the drawing board, and my confidence call on this is really high, is the fact that electromagnetic weapons to be used, and the same ones talked about under the documents known as Air Force Owning the Weather 2025 that's now publicly available, that if you excite the New Madrid Fault on the southern end, those tectonic plates, as proven by oil company research as far back as when Texaco was doing the research in the Gulf, those tectonic plates in the New Madrid Fault line are connected to the tectonic plates in the Gulf. And if you had an earthquake in one specific location at the New Madrid that you artificially induced, you might be able to induce a tsunami of 400 to 500 feet that would hit the Gulf Coast. And I go back to, and this is where I've got to kind of take a right-angle turn. I wrote a 7-part series on how the Gulf was a false flag, and I included in it some of what Jesse Ventura talked about when he did his conspiracy theory episode on the Gulf, and he had it right. He had the Army Corps of Engineers on with S.I. Reeves and her publicity director, and they had a document, a $40 billion payout to the not National Guard, but to the Army Corps to evacuate the Gulf Coast. Jesse, I thought, made a loose connection to the fact that they want this to be an energy hub. But boy, did he ever end up being correct, because they started using Corexit on the oil spill. Corexit does not disperse oil. It submerges it into the water column, and it basically kills everything. And the only thing that can grow in CO2 less water is algae. And what's been springing up on the Gulf Coast? Algae farms, courtesy of people like George Soros and their friends. Now, this is the follow-up false flag I called for in my my series I wrote, the 7-part series on the Gulf. I said they're going to have a second false flag where they're going to force millions away from the Gulf. I thought originally it was going to be the methane bombs. And what happens when you use Corexit, you have high methane concentration. And as a consequence, I thought it was going to be that. But now I think it could be an earthquake started in the New Madrid Fault.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, wow. All right, we're getting some feedback here. Interesting feedback.
I hear that, and that's why I thought we were going to commercial break for a second here.
Well, that'd be a heck of a commercial, let me tell you,
I think it's Christians United Broadcasting Network hit the switch, and I think they just got it.
You know, I got to tell you, I was actually talking about this on another interview, and I got knocked off the air.
Oh, and for good reason. When you're talking about things like this, holy cow! So
let me tell you what else is going on that really kind of supports this. Particularly in the southern states, DHS is taking over coordination between the various state agency National Guard units. And I talked to a general who was fired recently, and I probably could use his name, but to be on the safe side, I won't. But I talked to him through a mutual third party that introduced us, and he told me he was let go, not by Obama, but DHS came in and escorted him off his own base because he would not cooperate in basically giving DHS control of interagency cooperation protocols between the various state National Guard units. And this is in the southeast part of the country. Now, if you had a false flag at the Gulf, where would the National Guard people come into play? Well, it would be right from there. And you'd have to control multi-state agencies of National Guards and emergency response teams. So DHS is actively trying to gain control of that. To me, that adds fuel to the fire that we could be looking at a potential false flag in the Gulf that will force millions off the coast.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, let me throw another data point at you. Now, this is someone who lives 500 feet from the Pasadena Rose Parade route. Very fine gentleman. I know this gentleman, and I will back him 100% in the information he provides. On New Year's Eve at 11:30 at night, he was laying in his bed and heard tracked vehicles. You're talking about tank-type vehicles and heavy rumbling diesel engines. Now, this convoy lit up his bedroom, searchlights almost. Well, he says it appeared to be searchlights that were mobile, and he was stunned to see these MRAPs moving north toward the parade route on Colorado Boulevard. Massive military helicopters, much larger than CH-47s, patrolled above the route on December 30th through the 2nd of January. The network television parade coverage, they showed none of this, and none of these stations showed any of this massive military presence who could have perhaps had a parade themselves. What do you make of that?
What I've been told, we've been getting reports now for a few years on massive troop and equipment movement, mostly equipment, here in the continental United States, U.S. military equipment. And what I've been told most of this is about is to stay mobile so you're not a predictable target. 3 years ago, they were drilling it. Today, they're doing it for avoidance. It would be the same reason that inside submarine hit zones, a destroyer will zigzag.
Makes sense. If you just stop and think, it does make sense.
Well, you remember your report you did with the storage of the ammunition, the 1.4 billion rounds of ammunition in storage facilities all across different cities across the nation.
Right.
Do you remember that, Dad?
Yes. I'm now getting that, too, that in these public venues that I've reported on where they've done drills, FEMA's done drills where they've taken kids from elementary schools to football stadiums and hired mock parents to beg for their release to desensitize the guards. I've also been told that in these military stadiums, they've also pre-positioned military equipment. Now, I came across some confirming information on this in the most humorous of ways. I was in the gym the other day, and a guy struck up a conversation with me, and he just happened to be familiar with my website. It was very serendipitous when I introduced myself to him. And he said, you wrote that thing on the stadiums. He goes, you're right. He says, I've been at University of Phoenix Stadium where the Arizona Cardinals play football in the NFL. And he says, I got into a scuffle with a fan from the other team, and they took us below. And he said, they have vast reaches of cell blocks below this stadium. I said, well, how many would you estimate? He said, as far as I could see. He said, I would hesitate to give a number, but I could see these jail cells as far as I could see. Now, doesn't that strike you as odd? You have 70,000 people at a football game. Are you planning on arresting 10,000 people someday? Or are they going to be used for something else?
Yeah, you're not talking about what do they call those stadium jails? Where they hold the drunks and the people that streak across. I don't even know if people streak anymore, but you know what I'm talking about. So
yeah,
this is
I
much
do.
more sophisticated.
That's what I thought he was talking about.
Yeah,
and it was so serendipitous about how it came up because he says, "What do you do?" And I went through a few things I did, and I said, "I also write for my website." I said, "The Common Sense Show." He goes, "I've been there." And then he started telling me the story. And he said, I just had too much to drink and got into a scuffle. And he said, I don't know if I was supposed to see what I saw. He said, but he said, easily they could have housed hundreds, if not thousands of people.
And okay, so this is under which stadium?
University of Phoenix Stadium
in
Phoenix, Arizona. Actually, it's in Glendale, Arizona, a suburb where the Arizona Cardinals football team plays.
Now, I remember seeing something. Arizona Stadium was one of the first stadiums to have this new type of field. I forget this AstroTurf, where they actually have it in sections where they can just pull the whole field right out from underneath the stadium if they want to. And I wonder if
a lot
in
of the
this
local
renovation,
schools, they do that for the schools. They pull the field up, and you basically have a tiled floor, and you have a lot of local schools do their graduations there for their students. So, yeah, you're exactly right.
Talk about multi-use, potential multi-use turf, huh?
Let me tell you another story. At the time that they did the drill in Denver Sports Authority Field, where they went without parent permission and snatched kids from elementary schools and held them all day, they did the same thing at Giant Stadium in New York. But this is where it gets freaky. They referred to the area inside the stadium as the red zone. Now, I know football terminology. I used to play and I used to coach it. Inside the 20-yard line, when your team's ready to score, they call that the red zone. I don't think that's what they were talking about.
You want to venture a guess what they might be talking about?
Well, I think I just have to quote my friend Steve Quayle, red list, blue list. That's what I thought of when I heard this.
That's the first thing that came to my mind, actually, when you mentioned that. You could tell I don't follow football. I do know what the red zone is, but the first thing I thought of was the red list, blue list, and could it be that at this point in time that we're that close? Because this would, to me, Dave, and we've talked off air, and it's amazing because you are very consistent. Everything you've said tonight has matched what you said before off air and our conversations. Could it be that we're that close to really this activation of taking the U.S. out by not just by one way, not just by the killing of the dollar, not just by neutering the military, but by numerous ways, by getting hit all at once, EMP, nukes, whatever. It doesn't matter, just everything all at once, the kitchen sink.
How about shock and awe? That's what I think is coming. I think it's going to be on multiple fronts, using multiple weapon systems. Obama needs this for his presidency to survive. He's still got those scandals that won't go away.
Yes.
The birth certificate issue will never go away for him. I hate to say this because I don't want the knock on my door, but so many people are saying this. Jim Garrow said this on my show. Obama really fears harm to him. I hope it doesn't happen.
We've said
because I don't want to make a martyr out of him.
Of course not. And we pray for his safety every day. That's one thing, Dave, and folks, listen to me carefully when I say this. I mean, I've talked to Dave Hodges, and everyone that we've talked to has always and consistently praised for the safety of Barack Hussein Obama.
Yes.
It's the reason for that, of course, is we can you imagine? And this is me talking now. I mean, can you imagine, folks, what would happen if a Kennedy situation came and Obama was taken out, or Obama and Biden both? What would happen to his policies? What would happen to Obama the man? He would become Obama the martyr, and man,
he would become he'd become lionized. And if you remember, if you look back in history, John Kennedy was having a heck of a time getting a civil rights legislation through. But when he died, it sailed right through under Johnson. And Johnson was a Southerner, which is even more remarkable. What we would see if Obama, and I don't think Obama fears assassination by the military, and this is Dave Hodges speculating. I don't think he fears it from a person on the street. What I think he really fears is someone from the globalists, the banking cartel, to have him taken out, because it would enact so much sympathy for his policies. They could move things along very rapidly while the nation was in shock and mourning over this president. And so I, too, also pray for the safety of President Obama. I don't care how bad your president is, or if he even deserves to be president. In a time of assassination, it's never good for a country.
Absolutely. And
now, if you said to me he's going on trial tomorrow, and he could possibly do jail time, I would be on board with that, but not with violence.
No, anything lawful, constitutional, any type of constitutional activity, 100% behind that. Anything unlawful, of course, would not be sufficient, or would not be acceptable, I should say, because of that, the martyr factor. I mean, they would be chiseling a new face on Mount Rushmore. The next day. it would be that incredible in my view. So indeed,
in the Lincoln, associations that they did, and just the whole way that this has gone. And Mr. Hodges, you're definitely not the first person to talk about this on our show, and we've heard this from so many people, even from people who aren't in the political world, who are more in the spiritual world, just from their dreams and visions and from different messages that they received, and people who have been afraid, guests who've been not afraid or maybe afraid, I don't know, not even wanting to address it on air. It worried them so much.
Well, I do worry about it, and I think also the military feels the way that we feel about this as well, too. Because if you want to turn a popular uprising into an unpopular rebellion, kill the chief executive, and I think they would take extra precautions to try to protect him, even if they were in the move or the mode of trying to overthrow him.
Man, I'll tell you, we're walking on some thin ice, and not us, but I mean the country's walking on thin ice here, and one has got to wonder whether Obama at some point, now perhaps has he lost his utility to the globalists? Or does he still have some utility left? And that's something that we have to keep our eyes on. I've got a question here from a listener, and I want to get your take on this. A little off topic, but nonetheless, it does address the Fed, the monetary issue here, the killing of the U.S. dollar, which I believe is an active process. But in the last week of December 2013, of course, the 100-year charter. The Federal Reserve has reportedly had a 100-year charter. Now, I've heard that this charter was extended, and I think I've reported on this that it's been extended through various codified various legislation. But this listener said he's not heard anything about the renewal of the Federal Reserve 100-year charter. The expiration thereof. What's going on with this? Was the charter extended? Has it expired? Is there a charter at this point? What, Dave Hodges, do you say about this, or can you say about this?
Well, all I can tell you is I talked to a go-between between myself and G. Edward Griffin, and this is the only word I have on this, is that the charter is issued in perpetuity.
That's pretty much
that's all I know, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Ed about this.
Okay.
Actually, I'd like to get him on my show this spring, but December was the 23rd, I think, was the anniversary date.
Right.
That's come and passed without any fanfare, and even if there wasn't a charter, the government's operating under the principle of might makes right, so they're not going to care about the rules. They're just going to keep doing what they do.
Well, I checked the Federal Reserve website, and one of the frequently asked questions was about the charter, or one of the questions that was there, and they said they wrote that it was in perpetuity, as you mentioned. So certainly I would agree with what, and Mr. Griffin certainly has done so much research about this. And Eustace Mullins and other authors that predate Mr. Griffin have essentially said the same thing, so very good. But I wanted to get that question out there. All right. Wow. You've really created a very, well, I don't think you've created, I think you've brought to light a very tenuous situation that we face. One of the questions I had that's kind of off the wall, maybe. I see that you spoke at this Arizona Breakfast Club meeting on the 4th.
Yes.
I gotta ask you this: were the people there? What was your sense of the people's level of awareness, their senses that things were not right?
This is a unique group. I don't know if you're familiar with Ernie Hancock or not. Ernie has a show on LRN, and he used to be on RBN with me. And Ernie actually gave me my first writing job for freedomsphoenix.com. When this McCain thing happened, when McCain's people were trying to steal my property without compensation. And they have great activist subgroups inside Freedom's Phoenix. And Freedom's Phoenix basically runs the Arizona Breakfast Club. These people will do anything from photographing cops being brutal to protesting red light cameras, to end the Fed movement. They were the ones that invented the phrase "Lovolution," that was Ron Paul's moniker. They were very close with the Paul people.
All right.
So I don't think there's an activist group in the country, and I apologize if there is, but I don't think there's an activist group in the country that is as effective and as hardworking as this particular group. And that formed the core of who I was speaking to. In fact, Barry Hess was in attendance, and Barry is the normal candidate for Libertarian governor that he runs constantly. There were really good writers that were there, most of them of the Libertarian Party. So I've kind of answered your question through the back door. This isn't your typical audience. These people are fully awake. They know what's going on. So in one sense, I do think I brought some information that was novel to them, but in the other sense, they weren't surprised because they know, really what the game is.
I got to tell you, Dave, I just got hit by a Nerf ball from Joe. We do have a Nerf bat in the office in case one of us gets out of line, although I keep it by my desk. He, however, had somehow got the Nerf ball and threw it at me saying, hey, he answered this question already. He talked about this. I guess what I was looking for, and you answered that earlier, I guess I was looking for the people that were represented there. Are they seeing a change in the people that they talk to? Are they seeing a change in the people's, I don't know, level of awareness? It seems like I'll give you an example. I went and got my hair cut, and I was talking to my barber, and it seemed like he has been awakened all of a sudden. He's got a new level of awareness he didn't have 6 months ago, or 3 months ago, or even 2 months ago. I guess are they seeing that, the people that you talk to, the next circle out? Are they becoming more and more awake now? And if they are, of course, that would certainly speak to the threat that we're seeing.
I'll speak for myself first, and then I'll tell you where I think a lot of people that are activists are at. I see maybe we can reach a certain segment, but it's a limited segment. I actually think as things get worse, that the people who are what we like to call the sheep, they're digging in even harder to maintain their false paradigm because they don't want to have to deal with the truth. I mean, they know something's fundamentally wrong. I actually had a guy describe to me all these banking issues and concerns he has. And I said, well, that's what happens when you have a central bank that are run by foreign bankers and they're ripping the people off. And it goes, oh, you're one of those conspiracy theorists. So even though he identified the problem, he had to come back with a pre-programmed label. It's like neuro-linguistic programming. And I think a lot of the people are becoming very entrenched in their la, I don't want to hear what's going on.
Absolutely.
It's getting harder to reach a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, and I saw something today, and we fall victim occasionally here from not doing great research. Occasional satire article will slip through, and parts of it will be satire. And I saw an article today where it said there were 37 overdoses in Colorado or something like this, deadly pot overdoses because they legalized marijuana. And then you read the comment section, and there's people who were, it was only a matter of time until this happened. I knew this was going to happen. I mean, it just is an example of how the propaganda machine, how the lies can be bought into if you're not aware of the situations and the circumstances surrounding what's being reported.
Joe, one of the things I used to do when I was a mental health counselor is I used to work with ex-convicts in transition, trying to determine if they were worthy of full probation. And in doing that work, I also had to be a drug counselor. So I know a little bit of what I speak here. I don't think there's been a person in the history of the planet that's ever died from a marijuana overdose. What you're describing here that's reported is impossible.
Yeah.
Right. It was a satirical piece, and people just seemed to just latch onto it, and
it was just
an amazing thing. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
absolutely silly, and there's no, why is marijuana becoming legal around the country? And that's even a better question, because I'm surprised the CIA wants to give up their monopoly.
I love it. Yes, CIA Drug Central, and of course we know how that went with Mena, Arkansas, during the Clinton years, and of course extended on, and it's never stopped. So, wow. All right.
Well, drug money helped fund the Clintons' rise to power. I mean, let's not pull any punches here.
True. That's very true. Yeah. Wow. Well, Dave, I'll tell you what. I know this was last minute for you to come on the show, and I really appreciate both Joe and I do appreciate your time with us. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, Dave Hodges is our guest, thecommonsenseshow.com. Folks, bookmark that website. By the way, Dave, I don't know how you do this. You work a full-time job, do the radio show once a week, and then, of course, your articles are spot on all the time. You develop sources and contacts. It's just incredible. I want to thank you for all that you do. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that we probably should touch on, or anything that you want to maybe put an exclamation point at the end of what you
said?
I
want to issue a warning to everyone who's listening tonight, and the warning is this. The Agenda 21 forces in your local communities are absolutely going crazy now. My email box is flooded with reports. I can't even respond to all these. They're so numerous. But all of these communities are taking grant money from ICLEI or loan money that they probably won't have to pay back, and they're enacting these draconian policies like what I described out in the Antelope Valley. I mean, your SWAT team because your weeds are too high. I kid you not. I actually wrote an article about that today, and it's kind of funny. The one of the people that I featured in the article sent me his phone number today. I'm going to try to get him on my show, but this is happening everywhere. It's like they can't get Agenda 21 in fast enough. But I will tell you where I think this all fits in. I think the Agenda 21 is not the immediate threat. It's going to be the post-apocalyptic, this is how it's going to be. In other words, we're going to see false flag, civil war, possible World War III, subjugation, a purge, and I mean a deadly purge. I'm talking a genocidal purge. And then when we come out of that at some point, if the bad guys win, what we're seeing with these Agenda 21 policies coming into place will be what they've been prepping for the post-apocalyptic conflict that is coming. And so right now they're setting up for a Hunger Games type of society that will emerge after the coming conflict. I would tell people right now, if you really want to get busy and fight the good fight, go to your local city council and listen for things like smart growth, general plan amendments. And when you hear those phrases, you need to go armed with brochures or articles, pass them out, become a real pain in the backside to these city council people. And it's funny, and I'll say this in closing, I've talked to local politicians who put on their campaign signs, "I'm for smart growth." They don't even know what the heck they're talking about. I've asked them, what's smart growth? Oh, smart growth means we just utilizes the resources of the community. They have no idea. They have no idea what this is. They're taking money from the ICLEI interests to subjugate us after they're done basically conquering us. And if people want to fight the fight, go to your local city council and demand that we reject all Agenda 21 kind of policies. And by the way, they're using another phrase, too. It's not just Agenda 21. They're beginning to call it Earth First. I don't know if you've heard that or not. But I've been...
that is familiar. And they're implementing their Environmental Justice Plan 2014 starting this year, which is just a UN and U.S. Collaboration on how to implement Agenda 21. We went to a guy here locally. He's a sound technician, and he actually informed us on some of the local politicians that moved in here whose agenda it was to implement Agenda 21 here locally. And some of the things that you see them doing in the news, it's troubling, and just what you're talking about, taking grants. And we see the eminent domains, the property seizures. Part of the Environmental Justice Plan 2014 talks about all waterways, whether they're streams to ponds to lakes, are now, they say, are not private property, even if they're on land. They're now government property, and you have to have certain you have to follow certain regulations and manage it a certain way, or they can come and basically confiscate your land. Now we're just seeing the beginning stages of this, and we probably know how it ends with massive government intrusion and interference, but we have not seen the tip of the iceberg with Agenda 21, and it's only beginning to be implemented. And this implementation policy is just as bad, if not worse, as Obamacare is.
Yeah, I know. In fact, a lot of it goes hand in glove with Obamacare. Agenda 21 is about the breakup of the family, and I don't know, guys, if I've ever mentioned this on your show or not. Have I ever talked to you about Obamacare and seizing kids under Obamacare?
I'm glad you brought that up. You referenced it one time, and I had a couple of emails after that wanting you to expand on it. So if you don't mind extending your time a little bit, please talk about that.
Oh, sure, I'd be happy to. Excuse me, you can tell I'm fighting a cold here. I wrote an article back in September, and the name of it escapes me, and I'm sorry. But if you go to the website, it's in September, late August, early September, and I built the article based on what I read that Ben Swan discovered. And he found that if a mom was under the age of 21, the federal government with CPS could come into your home and take your kids if you were a smoker. And I said, I bet there's more to this than what Ben's reporting. And he did a good job finding it. And I found this document, and it was actually written by a group called the ICF, which is a think tank group for the UN, Agenda 21. And they wrote a 110-page document that I linked to in my article for Human Health Services, Kathleen Sebelius's organization. And it became the field manual for all 50 versions of the various CPS in the states. And they have all kinds of protocols they can follow to get themselves into your home and take your kids. And this is just absolutely stunning when you look at the totality. Obviously, no Obama plan would be complete without some form of gun control. So if you're a gun owner, you might expect a visit from your local CPS agent operating under Obamacare authority. And by the way, this became law on January 1st of this year. Also, if you have beer in the house, if you have bad grades, but they don't specify what bad grades are. Now, I'm lucky. I'm the proud father of an honor student. My son had a C. That'd be a bad grade. I don't know what it is to these guys because they don't codify it, but they say they can take the kids for what they call educational neglect. If you ground your kids, if you ground your kid for a week, you can't go out and play with your friends, they actually refer to this as isolation neglect. And as much as the Obama administration seems to love illegal immigrants, they even target them in this. They said if a kid doesn't speak English, is not fully acculturated, they would call this socio-cultural neglect, and they can come take the kid on this basis as well. Virtually they are taking any form of parental authority and turning it upside down, and then the kids can be at a risk to themselves. Let's say a kid's 15 years old, and he goes out and he experiments with pot and gets caught. Now, that would be a big deal in my family, but I don't think my kid should be taken away from me for that, but that's exactly what could happen. Or if your kid gets caught shoplifting, they can come and take your kid away from you. This is all under Obamacare, and it's in this 110-page HHS manual. And if you put in, I think if you go to the search engine on my website and put in Obamacare and taking kids, you'll find it. And the time frame is August, September of 2013.
How about August 17th? The mother
you got
of all
it.
Okay, the mother of all conspiracies aimed at our children.
Yeah, guys, I've written, I think, somewhere around 340 articles in the last 11 months, so they start to kind of run together. And so sometimes I have trouble remembering even the titles. But here's one thing I want to give a disclaimer when you go to the article, and I just discovered this 2 days ago, and I haven't had a chance to correct it. I have a lot of links in the article to the HHS document that the CPS is going to be using. But the main link that I title HHS, and it's hypertext linked, it goes to a justification chart for the program, but it doesn't go to the 110-page document. But if you click on the part where it talks about the various neglects, you will go to the 110-page document. So that document's still available. You just won't click on the main source. And it looks to me like they rotated the links they were using when they started getting exposed. But what we're talking about here is what the federal government is saying by enacting something like this is that it's what Melissa Harris Perry said. You know, you get to feed and bear the expense of raising your kid, but you don't control them. The collective controls your kids. And that's what parents are being told now. And that is something that I think is absolutely unacceptable, and we as Americans need to say no. But they show up with cops. It's like you almost get SWAT team just for being a parent.
This is really amazing and disturbing on so many levels. The HHS CPS field manual. Neglected children.
And we've covered this, how the Health and Human Services has teamed up with Environmental Justice. They have their own website, hhs.gov/environmentaljustice, and it talks about how the fair treatment and involvement of all people and everybody's going to have to be subject to this federal effort that Health and Human Services and this environmental EPA are teaming up, and it gets into all what you're talking about, the smoking, the treatment of children. And as you said, Ben Swan did that one piece, and you wrote the article, and I'm going to go back and read that article, so that if you can shoot that over to me. But yeah, there are PDFs here at the HHS Environmental Justice Strategy page, and they give progress reports, they give the manuals, and they have all these different subsections, which I haven't even gotten into yet. It's just so much reading all these PDFs. But they are.
They're the same people that wrote this that also wrote Common Core.
Would not surprise me a bit. And
it's all the same flavor. And I've written some things on Common Core on my website too that get into how it's actually dumbing down the kids. In fact, with my own son, and he's in 7th grade right now, for him to get to the Algebra 2 level and have calculus as well, which a lot of top-level 4-year universities require, he's going to have to take a summer school class now because of the scope and sequence they've gone to. I call this the deliberate dumbing down. The other thing that they're doing that really disturbs me is the best predictor of academic success is a kid's reading ability. And what they've done now in the literature classes is they've gone from about 90% literature and 10% informational text to where they've made it 50-50. So kids are going to be reading less. And when kids read less, they don't perform as well academically, and they're not as aware, and they're not going to read other things as much. So they won't be reading things like my articles or going to your website. And I think this is by design. This is what we mean by the dumbing down. The best thing we could do for our kids' education is to get the federal government the heck out of our education of our kids and let school boards do what they would do best, which is we care about our kids and we're going to make sure they get the best education. Right now, teachers are no more than automatons following these prescribed lessons in which things like global warming and climate change are built into the lessons like they're not controversial. They're highly controversial, but they just accept this as fact. There's total brainwashing on this, and, it's just, I could go on and on about the education part, but really the schools are doing just what the global elite want the schools to do. They want these kids to be smart enough to do their menial labor jobs that are coming, but not so smart that they can critically think and challenge authority.
The very definition of enslavement, and we're sacrificing, by the looks of things, we're sacrificing our children, allowing our children to become slaves, and we're just getting hit from all sides. Wow.
I know. I go through this with my son. I mean, he's come to me about climate change and global warming. And I've talked to him about the ClimateGate emails 1 and 2, and I've talked to him about the 30,000 scientists that said the research is very shoddy. He knows Dad's a researcher, and I teach research at the university level. And I've had to tell him. I said, son, if you were to ask me to come to a conclusion, which I don't think we can really do on climate change, but I said if I were to make a decision today, I would say it's a bunch of crap. And I said it's all about money making. It's all about control. And I'm going to say, now, if you walk into your science class tomorrow and say that to your science teacher, who's a generally good teacher and a good guy, he's going to think that you've grown a third eye on your forehead. He said, I understand what you're saying, Dad. He says, because he brings it up like it's the worst thing that could happen on the planet. And that's how brainwashed even the deliverers of education are. Common Core locks teachers in to having no academic freedom. I think the strength of a good teacher is when they're able to combine their philosophical views, their charm, their wit, their life experience into their academic rigor, make their classes interesting and challenging. But in Common Core, it's kind of like, here's your recipe, shut up, sit down, do your job, go home. You have no say in it whatsoever. And when Common Core was put together, not one teacher, not one state legislator was on any of the committees. And it came out of the, Presidential Council on Sustainability, as so much of this crap does, coming out of the UN, and it got funneled to the National Governors Association, and then they passed it along to the various states. And this is a prescription for disaster. And the same people that brought you No Child Left Behind are bringing you Common Core, are bringing you the Obama health home care guidelines for seizing your kids. It's all the same group. Remember the group, ICF. I link to them in that article that we've referenced, and I list the authors prominently. And these guys write a lot of the EPA legislation, the Clean Water Act. It's just this one small organization is really responsible for a lot of the enslavement going on in this country. And what's just amazing to me is parents are absolutely clueless about what's going on. Absolutely clueless. And let me ask you guys one question before you let me go. What we're seeing in schools now are what they call these bus evacuation drills. And they do these lockdown drills. Let me start with the lockdown drills. Okay, we have a bad man on campus with a gun. Lock the door. Get away from the door. Like someone couldn't shoot their way through the door. I think your best defense is to run like hell. I think what you're doing, first of all, you invite a person with a gun into a gun-free zone. That's a prescription for disaster. And then you're telling them to sit still so they become easy targets. And then on top of that,
wow.
They do this, what they call these bus evacuation drills, where there's some imaginary catastrophe never specified, and hallway by hallway is called out, and like good little soldiers, they march out, they sit on the bus, they're told about emergency procedures, and then they go back. And I've actually had to sit my son down. And he goes to the top middle school here in Arizona, and the school is well run. And there are good public schools, there are good administrators, there are good teachers. I'm saying the system stinks, but you do find the exceptions. My son's in one of the exceptions. But they do the bus evacuation drill. And I told him, I said, son, that's fine. But if you get the sense that it's not a drill and that they're just not playing games, and you can tell by the seriousness if they're frantic, I said, you run like hell and you call me, and I will come get you. Because I go back to what they did in Operation Mountain Guardian at Sports Authority Field in Denver, where they seized kids from the schools and then hired parent volunteers to pretend to want their kids back. I think it's a way that you lure some people to the stadiums, and then you keep the more dissident people. Maybe you let the other ones go home. Just speculation on my part. But do you really trust FEMA and DHS taking your kids on a bus? I don't.
No,
and I would tell
no.
parents out there, do not tell your kids to go on a bus for evacuation. You're better off having them call you.
You brought up a very interesting point. When my sister-in-law is a teacher in Wisconsin, a very large school district in Wisconsin, and she was visiting us over the holidays, and she had come into my office unexpectedly, and she said, "Let me ask you a question." She knows what I do and my background. And she said that the school district just came out with a new policy effective for the 2013-2014 school year, where a couple of things. The main thing, this addresses an active shooter scenario in the school. All the schools have been instructed to, and this is what you referenced somewhat, if there is an active shooter that enters a school, the teachers are instructed to lock the doors and hide the children underneath the desks or in closets or somewhere where they cannot escape, even if they are on the ground floor and even if there are window exits available. And she said, I can't, for the life of me, follow these instructions. Do you agree with these instructions, she asked. And I said, no, of course not. You get out of the school. If you've got access to getting out of the school, get out. What is with these school districts making these policies, these insane policies?
The districts aren't doing it. This is coming down from the federal government to each state Department of Education. These are FEMA and DHS protocols. In fact, they're even doing one extra thing in the schools now that I find interesting. On the first day of school of 2013 in Arizona, and I've heard this has gone on across the country, teachers were met with a questionnaire from their state Department of Education, which asked them about their skills. Some of the skills, I understand why the state government would have an interest in knowing. Do you have EMT experience? Can you administer first aid? If you had something that really happened, you'd want to know who you could depend on, and I think that's wise. But then they got into things like plumbing, construction, hanging drywall, mechanical stuff, repairing cars and I looked at this. In fact, I actually put it in an article that I wrote, a copy of the document, and referenced it to the original document. And I said, gee, sounds like they're trying to find out who can build their own FEMA camp.
Yeah.
When you read this stuff, it was about building a building of some sort. Why would they want to know? That's not what teachers do. They are teachers.
Correct.
They're not typically plumbers and carpenters, but they were surveying these work skills. But there could be another thing, too. If you look at Executive Order 13603, and Obama has the Secretary of Labor overseeing essentially what are two drafts. One draft is the military conscription run by Selective Service, and the other is going to be civilian conscription. They don't say this in the executive order, but they bootstrap the order back to Defense Act of 1950, and I believe in Section 702, and I've got this reference to my article, they say that they can take people with specific skills and employ them without compensation. That's slavery.
Well, exactly. No, we had a caller call in, and in fact, I got a couple of emails about this as well. We talked about 13603 last week, and we had a caller call in and say, wait a minute, that's hyperbole.
I don't like the terminology, the word slavery. The caller basically said he didn't like your use of the word slavery.
Oh, that's right. That was about your column. I should have called you about that. Yeah, that's... well, because wait a second, Dave. You will get the people will get conscripted yet compensated.
They'll be compensated. Correct, is what they said.
No. When you link to the 1950 Defense Act in there, it says without compensation. In other words, what Obama's saying in the executive order, here are the new provisions. I take control over everything: energy, food production, everything. But also I'm linking this back into this particular act from 1950. And when you go to the section that they reference, and I put the verbatim section in the article that I wrote last week, and it says in there, without compensation. Now, when I was speaking to the Arizona Breakfast Club and I brought this up, I said, what word comes to mind for you people when you hear the words without compensation and you heard slavery en masse? If you're forcing me to work, if you're going to force me out of my home and not let me go to my day job, and you're going to force me to work, it's something you choose for me, and you're not going to pay me, I call that slavery.
Absolutely.
I don't apologize for the use of the term.
No, nor should you, and I totally agree with you on this. So we would recommend to that caller and to the people who had emailed, reread the article and check out the link to the 1950 Act a little bit closer. Very
Doug, they don't even have to go to the link, although it's in there. I actually copied and pasted it right into the article.
Okay.
So
All right.
people would have no doubt. It says without compensation. They use the word employ people of specific skills and talents, but then they go on to say without compensation.
Without compensation.
Well, first of all, I don't have to work at anything the government tells me to work at. See, I believe I'm a free citizen. The government does not own me. I work at what I want to work. We got Chinese troops attacking this country. The government doesn't have to draft me in the military. I'll be there fighting along with you. It's for the defense of our country. But the government does not have the ability or the right to come and tell me or my son or my wife that this is what you're going to do if we say you're going to do it. No, we just need to say no.
No, you're exactly right. Spot on. And yet people will call, and the more I thought about that one caller in the reference to the word slavery, I thought of, it was a perfect distraction, get you out talking about something else other than the issue that you initially began talking about. And it could be wrong about that.
It's funny. I got a couple of emails about the caller that called into your show about that, and my response was, well, when people say without compensation, I call that slavery. If they want to call it indentured servitude, okay, we can call it that too, but it basically means someone's making you do something against your will.
Yeah, but see, the government believes that they have a right, since you're alive and they're letting you live, that's compensation enough. And I can see how in the future, if there was a breakdown in society, how that really could be into a policy of theirs and some type of emergency policy. And I'm sure it's in one of the DOD or DHS manuals that talk about the civilian operations. But it is just mind-boggling. You're right, and they're doing this at all levels, and we don't have to be drafted or called to do something. Many people consider the system we're in part of the slave system right now, and it is, absolutely is. And we are slaves to the system, but we have the ability to change that if we find ways to circumvent the system, and it's just a lack of thought and the doing more than anything.
Well, for a lot of us, prison really is no more than the space between the bars that we've created for ourselves. And when we begin to look at ourselves as independent people that live by certain codes and laws that we all agree upon, then it doesn't make any sense that you would allow someone working under a government title who's just another human being to say that they have authority over you to make you do what they want you to do. I absolutely would reject that. I would not submit to that. In fact, I'll even quote you, can't quote you, but I'll paraphrase what Solzhenitsyn said. He wrote, he said, maybe if we would have resisted, maybe if some of the people that came to our homes in the middle of the night as they took a quarter of us out of our cities and put us in the gulags, maybe if some of those guys didn't know they were going to return home that night, maybe we could have stopped it. And I'm not a violent person, but, my need for self-preservation and self-defense will come to the forefront if anyone tries to enslave myself or my family.
Very well
now,
said.
If the government comes to me and says, hey, we got Russian troops coming down Interstate 17, and we're going to need to use your house as a staging area, you don't have to even ask. If it's in the patriotic interest of this country, of course I'm going to submit. And I'm going to do what I need to do as a citizen to help my country. That's not what we're talking about here. Obama's not talking about building America or defending America. He's talking about tearing Americans and America down.
Indeed. And there's a huge difference.
Yes, there is. Mr. Hodges, we're up against the top of the hour. We thank you so much for your time, staying with us all the way till 10 o'clock our time, and really appreciate being flexible and coming on and sharing with us and giving out the information that you have. And once again, you said you're going to upload your yesterday's audio clips to your website, or your show to the website?
The goal is before I get to bed tonight to get that done for what was playing when I interviewed Deborah Tavares last night. Yes, I'm going to try to get that up, unless there's a technical issue that I'm not aware of at this time. So that'll be my one disclaimer. But I'll get that up there. And, guys, it's a pleasure to come on your show. You guys do a great job, and it's always an honor to be on with you.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it. And you knew when I asked you just for 30 minutes, yeah, sure. I know how that goes. Thank you for being so
I told my wife the same thing, but it's okay. We know how this business works.
Exactly. God bless you, my friend, and stay safe.
Okay. Good night, guys.
You have a good night, too. Thanks. That was Dave Hodges. His website is The Common Sense Show.
The Common Sense Show. TheCommonSenseShow.com. CommonSenseShow.com. Indeed.
Folks, we'll be right back. I almost said 2013 there, as we're still getting used to the new year and its change of dates. What is going on across the U.S.? We have new reports from this weather system. We have Arctic birds flying in Florida. Chicago is colder than the South Pole. What are we going to see next?
Wow.
Arctic birds in Florida, that has to be a sight for the Floridians out there. And we have the Indianapolis mayor who has banned driving for the storm, which is a whole other show in itself. I mean, you get into the business aspects of that, and it's not because of snow, it's because of the cold temperatures. How can you really say you're going to ban driving?
Well, an emailer had sent during the show here, and I can't get my hands on the email right away. Isn't it interesting? The Legend of Hercules, the movie, was released on January 10th of 2014. Or, I'm sorry, is scheduled to be released on January 10th. The Legend of Hercules is scheduled to be released in the United States. And isn't it interesting that we have the storm Hercules? Isn't that what we've got, Hercules, right now? Or is that...
No, see, you're not up to date on the storms. Hercules was last weekend. Ion.
Okay.
Ion is this weekend.
All right. Well, nonetheless, what's this all about? We know that the Illuminati, the power brokers, like to let people know in advance of what is taking place or what their plans are, more appropriately. So is this just a mere coincidence? Am I just seeing things that aren't there? I don't know.
You do that a lot, but
I do.
Not when we're talking about the news and things.
Get off me.
It's more getting into the wrong cars, and
Hey, I had a good medical reason for that. So,
and I see a lot of people in the chat room. Junior in the chat room is in Texas, where they say the temperature is like 10 degrees and the wind chill is 1, and then they say it's not normal at all. No, it's not normal at all to see this type of cold grip the nation, but I would bet that this has happened many times in the past since they've been monitoring weather. It's just something that doesn't happen very often. Also today, aside from the weather news, Janet Yellen was confirmed as the next Federal Reserve chairman. And
big surprise there, right?
Marking the first time a woman will lead this 100-year historic private entity of a corporation. The 67-year-old Miss Yellen has been an influential proponent of the Fed's extraordinary measures to revive the economy, even though interest rates are very close to zero. This article from the New York Times I'm reading from. It goes on to say, but Miss Yellen will face the adronious task of overseeing the gradual unwinding of those measures despite the uncomfortable high unemployment rate of 7% and subdued inflation. So the New York Times admitting to subdued inflation even without the use of energy or food prices in their calculation of inflation. During this confirmation process, senators from both sides of the aisle criticized the Fed for not doing enough to aid the economy and help middle-class Americans and for trying to do too much, thus distorting the markets and risking new bubbles. And there's quotes from different people here and their opinions of the Fed and what the Fed's doing. But, I mean, just another face for another agenda, another turn in the agenda, as Ms. Yellen will probably represent something, a new direction that the Fed will be turning. And some of the rhetoric from this article, it makes it sound like they're going to wind down the quantitative easing program, which will...
Well, they bumped it down 10 million, correct? Yes.
Did
yes.
they?
Yes. That's...
What is that, like a percent? Are they doing like 80 billion or 40 billion? No, was it 80 million a month?
It's 85 billion.
Billion, okay.
Or million.
Trillion. Why not trillion?
No. It's 85.
I know.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. You folks,
85 billion a month. 85 billion a month. But it's back down to 75 billion a month. You're right.
All right.
So
you start looking at these numbers, and it becomes difficult to comprehend after a while. People throw million around, and then billion, it's easy, and then trillion. What's quadrillion, I think. What's after a trillion? Armageddon.
Yeah.
Apocalypse.
And what they say we're in debt, forget the national debt, $250 trillion or something like that.
The unfunded liabilities, right. Exactly. Our unfunded liabilities, meaning our social programs, the coffers that have been raided, such as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of this, you're looking at an amount we'll never be able to pay. So, million, billion, trillion, does it really matter at this point? What matters, of course, is the metals market taking a beating, this artificial downward manipulation. Of course, they're gonna make the metals look bad.
Look what they did with the stock market since they started the QE3 program.
Correct.
And look what they're gonna, like you said, the unwinding process.
And with the dollar, they're making the dollar attractive, so people will flock to the dollar. Why? Well, think of the Titanic. Think of the dollar being the Titanic. Everyone get on board, and they're going to go out and send it out and sink it. That's what the plan is. And I know it's uncomfortable and even sounding conspiratorial to talk about, but that's exactly what the plan is. It's the murder of the U.S. dollar. And don't forget, as we talked about at the beginning of the program, what's going on in the Middle East. This plays well into the killing of the dollar, because at the end of the day, they want to take out they want to destroy the United States, because we're a speed bump into their 10 control sector kingdom, and they can't have our sovereignty. And of course, part of our sovereignty is the U.S. dollar. So all of this none of this is just a gigantic cosmic accident. All of this is planned.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would even say the U.S. dollar is sovereign under the control of the Federal Reserve. Our money used to be sovereign. Now it's privately controlled, but regardless, it doesn't matter. Right.
It still has it still buys the military might that allows the free flow of oil. So, if anything, it's backed by that.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, the Federal Reserve hiring lots of new armed police officers. This is from Infowars.com. It says, mirroring a trend seen across the federal government, the Federal Reserve is hiring a raft of new police officers, security guards, in developments that some see as a preparation for civil unrest. Despite only being as Federal Express, the Federal Reserve central banking system has its own law enforcement arm. Officers belong to which are lawfully allowed to be armed both on and off duty, including with semi-automatic pistols, assault rifles, and submachine guns. Ads posted on job websites catering for the Federal Reserve suggest that demand for law enforcement personnel and protection officers is increasing. Also, another interesting piece of news from foreignpolicy.com. FBI drops law enforcement as primary mission, now stating that it is national security that is their primary function. The FBI's creeping advance into the world of counterterrorism is nothing new, but quietly and without notice, the agency has finally dedicated to make itself in one of its official organizational fact sheets. Instead of declaring law enforcement as its primary function, as it has for years, the FBI fact sheet now lists national security as its chief mission.
Well, they failed with respect to the Muslims of the Americas in the Catskill Mountains, Sheikh Barack+Ali Jilani, who is governing the International Quranic Institute in the Muslims of America from Pakistan. Of course, the Muslims of America, having numerous trading compounds across the United States, of course they've consolidated many. It used to be 35, I believe it was, or 37. Now they've consolidated many of those, but sure, law enforcement to national security, they've failed in that respect. They have not taken any action against this outside external Islamic terrorist organization. And, of course, the terrorist extraordinaire, Sheikh Barack+Ali Jilani, the man who saw fit to issue a religious statement against yours truly and publish it on his website, instead of doing anything, the FBI, of course, there's photographs on the Muslims of America website of the FBI agents breaking bread with the occupants of the compound.
Interestingly enough, on this fact sheet, the second thing it lists that did not change, it says the FBI does not keep a file on every citizen of the United States, which is kind of weird. Other news, Fukushima. I don't know how many of you saw a video that's went viral over the internet showing radiation readings of a person who made a private YouTube video on San Francisco beaches as high as 126, I think it's millisieverts. But there was a 500% radiation increase on the California beach coast, according to this YouTube video. Now, health officials in California were telling residents that they were going to check into it, they were going to investigate and see what the cause are. Now they're telling people not to worry. The video, Fukushima radiation.
Go ahead. Take your shoes off and put it in squish the sand between your toes.
Wait till you hear some of this excuses. The video is called Fukushima Radiation Hit San Francisco. Has been viewed 500,000 times since being uploaded on Christmas Eve, and has raised concerns among residents who fear that nuclear waste from the March 2011 disaster in Japan may be arriving on their side of the Pacific Ocean. Though throughout the course of the 7-long video clip, a man tests out his Geiger counter radiation detector while walking through Pacifica State Beach outside of San Francisco. At times, the monitor on the machine seems to show radiation of 100 counts per minute, or the equivalent of 5 times what is typically found in that type of environment. There is, and here we're going to get into some of the comments. The Half Moon Bay reported on Friday that the government officials conducted tests along California's Pacific coast after word of the video began to spread online, but found no indication of radiation levels that had reached a hazardous point. It's not something that we feel that is an immediate public health concern. Dean Peterson, the county environmental health director, told the Review. We're not even close to this point of saying that any of this is from Fukushima, he went on to say.
It's all background radiation. It's all normal background radiation.
That's what this guy says here. The next person here says, although radiation levels were clearly higher than typical, Peterson emphasized that it was still not unsafe for humans. Nowak wrote, a person who would need to be exposed to 100 microrems of radiation for 50,000 hours before it's safe surpasses safety guidelines set by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, he explained. And last but not least, I honestly think the end result of this is that it's just higher levels of background radiation, as you guessed. And I don't think you read this article before we started talking about it, so it was a good guess. But the lack of care, I mean, we have radiation for almost 3 years now in uncontrolled, still contaminating the environment, Fukushima. For 3 years, that has been, we've had waves after waves of radiation hit the West Coast. There's even readings, there's a new video out on YouTube somebody made of, in Minnesota, the levels, radiation in the snow was double or more what it should be. In 3 years, you had a wall of debris hit the West Coast that came from Japan last year. And you have people in the government of local, state, and in the United States saying that this is not an immediate health concern. This is not anything you need to worry about. We're not even sure at this point that this is from Fukushima.
Of course, you had the Navy people, 71 Navy people develop...
USS, was it Ronald Reagan?
I don't recall, but,
yeah.
Of course, having the cancer, clusters of cancer. What are we doing? Why is the media silent on this? Does silence equal being complicit in the cover-up in this regard? Well, of course, I guess the reason why, look, we only have really 5 media conglomerates controlling all of the media sources, so I suppose the only voice in the wilderness would be the new media, shows like ours and the independent ones who are saying, hey, wait a minute, there's a problem here. But Joe, seriously, I would believe that the entire world, isn't this what the United Nations should be for?
Yeah, and there's a question asked in the chat room earlier, all this control on carbon dioxide and all this talk about global warming, all that effort and control and money into global warming, but they can't even fix Fukushima, was the comment. And that's what common sense would tell you. How in the world are they going to sit there and lecture people about their carbon emissions when they have super radioactive particles released into the air, contaminating the whole Earth at this point, ruining an ocean and its life inside of it? And you're not going to concern yourself, and you're going to actually have the audacity to tell other people that it's not an imminent public health issue?
Far be it from you to have a fire in your fireplace in San Francisco, or don't you dare smoke in an apartment with adjoining walls. But as far as the radiation from the most significant disaster ever, that being Fukushima, it's okay. Don't pay any attention to that. It's incredible.
Yeah, you know the end is near, or these people just know that our end is near. If they're just going to let this stuff rain down on us, and they're going to act like it's all good and nothing's going on. What do you mean nuclear reactors exploded? You're a conspiracy theorist. I mean, really? 3 years later, 3 to 5 nuclear meltdowns, full-scale meltdowns, and this is how you're going to treat the problem?
Hard to believe. And folks, don't forget, tomorrow we can talk to Stan Deo about this tomorrow as well. Wednesday, Scott Stevens is going to be joining us talking about the odd weather we're having. Could this be something different than maybe it's being presented? So, a very good week planned. I will say this: it's darn cold outside of the Hagmann and Hagmann studios, where I think the wind chill is what, 25, 30 below. And I've got to say, we were told, we were instructed to expect outages, power outages. Now we do have backup generator power for the studio. That said,
when I read the weather report today and it said, "Do not drive unless you have to," I almost called in sick or said, I'll do the show from home. But I chose to
brave it, right?
Gather myself together, to get out there.
It's a 3-dog night.
And so we are seeing reports. Texas power grid on the edge. Power demand soars.
This. And that raises a question as well.
And we have Christians United Broadcasting saying it's only 51 there. I don't know if they're complaining or not. Troy, last week he was like 83, and he was telling me how hot it was when we were sitting here freezing.
Exactly,
but yeah, this stuff should be gone by, the storm should be gone by Wednesday from what I have seen.
Right.
And we'll be back up into normal temperatures, Thursday or Friday. We'll be back into the 40s here.
But the odd thing was, though, well, wait a second. The odd thing was, just 48 hours ago, it was 50 degrees.
Yeah, no, it rained.
It rained.
Last night.
Correct.
It was raining, I think, 3 in the morning I went to sleep. And before that, I went outside and I looked, and it was rained so much that the roads had just puddles of sitting water in them.
Exactly.
And as soon as I woke up this morning, I knew. I got up at 8 and I looked outside, and it was just snow covered. And underneath that snow, you could see the shiny ice that's covering the roads. And it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be with the ice. They must have salted all night long, even during the rain, because the main roads weren't as bad. But I just can't imagine losing power in this.
Well, and that's something that I think is very significant when they're telling you, look, prepare for periods of power outages. And folks, I mean, think about the elderly. Think about the people who don't have any backup plan, who are alone. It's really, and people will laugh. It's interesting how many emails I've gotten about this, and where people are laughing and saying, "Oh, come on, it's just normal weather patterns." Well, okay, fine, but it's still important for news. Joe, I'm going to toss it back to you, my friend. You're on the board.
We'll take some calls, and we'll do that now. We're going to go to 916 area code. You're up first. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hey, Doug. Bill, it's Lars.
Hey.
Hey, good to talk with you.
Happy, blessed 2014, and I wanted to, if you guys can listen to later on Omega Man Radio's show with Joey Ferrari. He had a prophecy about New York City, and I would encourage you to look at that up. It was earlier today, and
can you just kind of give us just an overview of the prophecy? You don't have to get too detailed.
Yeah, in a nutshell, Spiritual land, and he had some dreams of New York City, some buildings coming down, and just a lot of warning that's coming from the West Coast to the East Coast. And I had a dream on the 5th, and the dream was almost like in a cartoon state. It was the Statue of Liberty, and I saw it literally get cut right in half about the waist and just fell, like it just got cut, but it fell. It only lasted maybe 3 seconds. But I was going to read a scripture because we need to not be ignorant to the devices of Satan. And this is in the book of Hosea 3, right, verses 4 and 5. Hosea chapter 3, verses 4 and 5. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, without his prince, and without a sacrifice, without an image, without an ephod, and without teraphim. After shall the children of Israel return and seek the Lord their God, David their king, and shall fear the Lord and his goodness in the latter days. So this is about today, and the Lord really just had me look up the teraphim. So when you have time, do a study about those demons. And they look like, I saw some pictures of what they used to, the idols of them, they look like trolls. And this last week has been just so supernatural, just as I thought the end of the year was going to be, for me personally, some things that weren't going right with someone that I really care about. God in the last turnaround, I thank the Holy Spirit. But in that, I had a dream, and the dream took me into a state where I was literally wrestling against this demon. And I got so fed up and lashing out with me with his teeth. He had these teeth that were like razors, and I just went over and grabbed him from his upper jaw and his lower jaw, opened it up, stuck my foot down his throat, and he disappeared. Then a few days later, I read about these teraphim. So I know the Lord's showing me something. I would encourage you. These are literally demonic idols that are brought into homes. So your listeners, if they can get some understanding about them, when those demons know that they're identified and you know them, there's a greater deliverance. So, that's kind of it. I'm going to go outside here and blow the shofar for you. And the word I got a couple of days also ago was this was going to be a year of refreshing for the things.
Amen. There we go.
Yes, Lord. And, Lord, I just ask that your refreshing would fall upon Doug and Joe and the listeners, Lord, in the name of King Jesus. And, Lord, you put in my spirit that what was established in 2 Chronicles 7 would be fulfilled in many in 2014. Study 2 Chronicles 7, get a lot of knowledge about his throne, and then you can tie it in with Psalm 97. Psalm 97. 2 Chronicles 7 and Psalm 97.
All right.
So thank you guys, and love you guys.
Love you too. Thanks for the call, and stay warm out there.
Oh, it's been it's California, but anyway, we need some rain, so we need some rain out here. So we pray for the rain, and thank you, Lord.
All right.
God bless you, my friend.
Send you some snow. How about that?
Yeah, truck it out there.
Yeah.
But by the way, Joe, I forgot to tell you this, and listeners, you'll be encouraged to know that a week from this Sunday, 1 week from this Sunday. Wait a minute. No, I'm sorry.
February 2nd.
No.
Are you going
I'm sorry.
to set stuff up behind my back?
Yeah, I am actually. On the 12th, which is a week from yesterday, on the 12th, this coming Sunday, Steve Quayle and Pastor David Langford, this coming Sunday in a special show. Check our website for details on that.
Oh, good. also we're getting some requests for V, so we're going to have to get him back on. I want to read, there was a report on Steve Quayle's site, and it was about flu shots because of we talked about in News in 2 Minutes has been on top of this, the H1N1 spreading across the United States, and also the various strains of the H1N1 virus, the H7N9, we can go through the list.
I want to say this real quick, Joe. We're very proud to be part of or affiliated with the Full Spectrum Survival and News in 2 Minutes. Think about this. They were the first, I believe, the first media entity to talk about H1N1, the flu epidemic.
Right.
And they talked about this last month.
And that's where, we started looking into, we listen to what they play or what they give us every night, their News in 2 Minutes, which is put together through algorithms and different methodologies that is very effective. As they said, a lot of times the stories they put out won't get picked up by the mainstream until 2 or 3 days later. But what I wanted to talk about here was a report of these flu shots. Now, I would not advise anybody to get a flu shot. I would ask people to do their own research to see whether they feel it's necessary for them or not, to see if it's something they should do. But there's a report here, a disturbing report out of Atlanta, CBS local Atlanta. Girl falls asleep up to 30 times a day after getting flu shot. A 15-year-old girl is reportedly falling asleep up to 30 times a day after getting a flu shot. It says here, a brief description, she's gone from being a bright, outgoing girl to one who cannot go out on her own. The girl's name is Chloe. Her mother's name is Rebecca. She doesn't have more than a couple hours at a time, but she can have disturbing dreams. Chloe Glasson will begin a new treatment at the specialist drug sodium oxybate at the Royal Hospital for Sick Children in Edinburgh, UK, in hopes to get back to normal sleeping pattern. And GlaxoSmithKline, the manufacturer of this Pandermix, said in a statement they are researching how the narcolepsy is reportedly being triggered by some of the drugs. Apparently, this is not the first person who is suffering from a sleep disorder after receiving a flu shot. At least 100 people are suffering from sleep disorders after getting vaccinated with Pandermix. Now, here we have Tamiflu, I think it's called, and we played a clip last week where a lady talked about getting her own kids enrolled in Obamacare as their patriotic duty. This lady is a doctor who I watched on several different networks over the weekend come on and talk about this winter storm. She's the one who, a year ago, there was a clip where she said, it's not a conspiracy, get your damn vaccines. That was on like a Fox News clip, I think. And she was on talking about Obamacare, and a clip we played last week. But I saw her at least 3 separate times on different networks when they were talking about this winter storm, this polar vortex coming, and this lady, all she could talk about was getting your flu shot. And there had to be some kind of reward for her.
Commission.
Telling people that she must be paid by these lobbyists. And it's something I'm going to find out. I got her information, and we're going to have to find out. But the report from Steve Quayle's site, I'll put this link in the chat room, and I will read just a little bit here. 2 dead, 81 hospitalized in Oregon, H1N1 flu cases. And it goes on to say, I do not endorse flu shot, but Kings5.com, local broadcast, it says 2 dead, 81 hospitalized from H1N1 is swine flu, which caused the pandemic in 2009. A 5-year-old boy from Eugene, Oregon died. And
I remember this back in the 70s, too, the swine flu.
The swine flu was big in the 70s?
Yes.
Okay. I did not know that. I thought this was something new. But we're seeing there was a map on Before It's News about this swine flu outbreak and the danger areas. And I'll have to find that. I got it handy here. But you got to keep your eyes on this and watch your area to see if there are outbreaks, because regardless if you have a vaccine or not, people are still reporting getting sick,
right?
Vaccine or not, even afterwards, beforehand, they're still getting sick. So just be aware. And this cold weather, this warm to cold weather, is really makes it all the worse.
And I want to say this, contrary to popular belief, you cannot. Oftentimes you'll hear of families where one family member will get sick and then the rest will get sick, and then everybody gets better, and then all of a sudden the first person or the second person will come down with the flu again. and they'll say, well, it just made a circular pattern. No. That's not how it works. You get sick, you develop antibodies. Someone else gets sick, they develop I believe it's antibodies or resistance to it. So whatever you're getting again is something different. It's a different type of strain than the first one. So just keep that in mind. It's a wives' tale or a falsehood that you would get reinfected by the same type of virus or the exact same virus. So just keep that in mind. Also, from Dan, real quick here. How many people do we have listening to us in Akron, Ohio? I know at least one. I know more than one. Are you doing any banking at Fifth Third Bank?
More bank problems.
Fifth Third Bank. How do you even develop a name like that? Fifth Third Bank. Dan walked into Fifth Third Bank branch the other day.
Take a fifth of your savings, a third of your checking.
Hey, you're on target tonight. He walked in. Dan walked into the Fifth Third Bank, located at 656 West Market Street in Akron, Ohio. And guess what he saw there? The airport-like security portal. With the the two doors you get to pass through, and then there's a metal detector, and then another two doors to pass through. Well, they installed them at this bank, so it's kind of like a jail if necessary. They can kind of stop you and jail you. There's a metal detector in between. So bear in mind that the banks are acting as if, the banks are setting up detention portals in the doorways.
Well, it's for your safety, right? It's in case there's a robbery. You have to be able to lock you down.
Sure.
In case there's gunshots on the street, right?
That's,
Going back to what Dave Hodges said.
Anymore, it's so difficult to really follow. It makes your head want to just blow up. I mean, it's crazy.
I know, and you've been working, since 6 o'clock this evening, so your head's almost there.
Try about 5 this morning, but
no, it looks like it. I know. Let's go back to the phones here. 720. We're coming to you. 720.
Hey, I hope it's not too noisy here.
You staying under the bridge?
I work in the Colorado.
It was noisy there. It's better now. Thanks.
Sorry, I work in the medical marijuana industry, and I'm at work. So I had heard Dave Hodges talking about briefly the relation of medical marijuana and retail marijuana in Colorado to the CIA giving up their hold on it. And I believe that the CIA might have dropped their hold on the medical marijuana industry just so that they can get a tighter grip, because with these new regulations they've got, they track the plants from seed to finished product, and they even track which customers it goes to at the sales point. As such,
absolutely,
I believe that they're doing this not only for surveillance, because number one, they get data on everybody, but number two, they've also got some interesting regulations as far as firearms. For instance, if you are a medical red card holder, or if you work in the industry, just being licensed to work here, you forfeit your right to the Second Amendment.
Really?
Yes, that is a fact. I had to waive my amendment right just to get this job.
You have paperwork on that? Or available to you?
I can probably get some for you.
Boy, if you could scan that agreement, and you feel free to redact the personal information, but scan it and send it to us in an email form. We'd like to see that.
That's not right. Not at all. That's craziness.
Certainly, but I also think it sets a precedent for later on down the road. If they're trying to get such a high excise tax that it takes out all of the profit from the industry, and you add all of these other tertiary things that they've got going on here, I think what we're seeing is a narrowing focus as far as control of the populace, which they're testing with this product that's less than shiny in the public light.
Okay, you mentioned something that I know for a fact has been taken place or has taken place in the past, where the CIA will, how can I put this? Will put markers in, microscopic markers into, we'll say, a substance that would be used to cut opium or heroin or whatever. You're saying that they're doing the same thing to marijuana?
Sort of. They're actually tracking it through a system of RFID tags, ironic, I know, on the bags and the plants themselves as they are processed. And then as they are sold to patients and whatnot, we have to keep a record of it in our system. So every purchase I've ever made from my company is on record. They know down to the penny.
So is this the industry you're in? Is this considered a pharmaceutical, a medical agent?
Currently, the one that I work for is a medical only, but we're having a shake-up with this recreational relicensing that Colorado's been going through. And we're probably going to get relicensed as a dual recreational and medical at the same time. But for now, it's recreationals at other stores. But we were also seeing huge sales. There was over $1 million worth of revenue just in the 14, 15 stores that were open on day one.
Okay, wait a second, though. You mentioned about the dual-use recreational part of this. Was that made legal? I think I might be missing something here. I thought this was just for medicinal purposes only, but there's a dual use for recreational use?
When Colorado had their vote in November, we legalized for recreational, and it's been a transitionary process. So we've got recreational and we have medical both at the same time. So it's in a mix-up at the moment.
Wow, we're going to have to get Sean on there.
No,
certainly. I'm a big fan of the show. Been listening a long time. So if you guys ever want to get a hold of me, I'm here.
I do have one question before you go, and something Mr. Hodges raised and didn't get into. Why are we seeing this push to legalize marijuana in the States all of a sudden?
Well,
and why is it being accepted, I guess?
This might be an opinion as opposed to any actual backed-up fact, but docile nature. I can't remember ever seeing, I mean, I'm young, but still, I can never remember seeing an article from any time, anywhere, saying pothead goes on a rampage. And I think that aside from being able to tightly control the industry, they're also looking at essentially taking the populace down to a more controllable level. For instance, the medical marijuana card also has a 5 nanogram restriction, which is extremely low for driving. So you can get a DUI if you, say, smoked a joint 3-4 days ago. And that type of restriction can get very oppressive because it means as a medical user, at any given time, if you are pulled over, if you test positive, which they take blood for, by the way, then you will get a DUI.
Interesting. Of course, that's always a good revenue generator.
Absolutely. They're getting it on both sides.
And of course, with the medicinal as well as recreational use, I'm sure pizza shops, Taco Bell, and the Hostess company with Twinkies are making out as well.
You'd think so.
Fell flat.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us,
caller.
caller.
I'll let you go and have a good night.
You too. God bless you and take care.
And certainly keep in touch, my friend, please.
Can do.
All right. Love to hear from you. Love to hear from you again. And if you want to, send your contact information. Perhaps we can talk off air when it's not so windy there or whatever.
All right. I'll email it to you with MMJ in the title, Doug.
All right, sir. Very good.
Thanks.
Thank you, man.
God bless.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Wow. I'm telling you, man. I just look. I'm in my 50s. I just never thought I would see what I'm seeing.
No. No. And we see this now too in Utah. I don't know. We didn't get a chance to get into this. Just like California, there was, I think, Proposition 3. The citizens of Utah voted to ban the legalization of gay marriage. Well, guess some activist judges jumped into the mix here and said, no, that's unconstitutional. Now, apparently, this issue is going to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. This from the Salt Lake Tribune. Supreme Court halts Utah gay marriages pending appeal. Now, what happened was they voted against this as a state. Utah did. A judge came in and said it was unconstitutional. The U.S. Supreme Court put same-sex marriages in Utah on hold, granting the state's request for a stay while it appeals a ruling that laws banning such marriages are unconstitutional. The court said the stay would be in place until the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver makes a decision in Utah's appeal. And the state's stay application was filed with Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who referred it to the whole court. According to this order issued Monday, Sotomayor assigned it to the 10th Circuit Court, which rejected Utah's request for a stay 3 times. The U.S. District Court Judge Robert Shelby, who denied the state's request that the stay his December 20th order overturning Amendment 3 while Utah appealed. Amendment 3 was an issue Utah citizens voted on, as I said, banning gay marriage. Then this judge, Robert Shelby, came in and said, no, you can't do this. It's unconstitutional. Again, we have to ask the question, why put it up for a vote? Why even bother voting? If this doesn't show you how little power your vote holds anymore, how little influence what you think or care about as an American citizen for this country, if they can put something up for a vote and it gets passed, the citizens vote on it, and the judge can just step in and say, nope, it's unconstitutional. Where does that stop? Does it stop with gay marriage? Does it stop with monetary policy? Does it stop with, what we're seeing with the filibuster stuff, the nominations? Does it stop with the president?
Well,
can the president be voted
and I'm glad
into
you brought
office
that up.
And the judge say, nope, we don't accept this, unconstitutional?
No, but I'm glad you brought that up, because remember that cave in for the filibuster, and everyone said, "Oh, that's just a distraction." No, it's not, because what area of the country does that affect most? Of course, that affects the Washington D.C. and the appellate courts and the nominees for the appellate courts.
Right.
So they're stacking the judiciary for this very purpose.
So they can get their agenda through faster, and they can get their nominees through faster. But
exactly.
Like I said, where does it end? Are we going to see? I mean, we almost saw in 2000 a judge decide who is the president. But I wonder if it will ever come a time.
We saw that. We didn't almost see it. We saw it. We saw it being taken to the Supreme Court, and
Bush had already. He already.
Well, right.
Pushed Al Gore out of the way and said, "I won. I won." But it was accepted.
And yes. Now we've got black box voting, and of course, we're going to have some people talking about black box voting. And of course, if your vote could be hijacked, if your vote could be changed, we've had so many people say that the electronic voting system is corrupted, it can be hacked, and it is being hacked. So we are nothing more at this point than a third world nation with respect to the voting system. We need to go back to paper ballots, and put
the hanging chads.
No, not paper ballots.
Okay. Well, those are not paper ballots. Those are the punch holes.
Well, right. Yes.
Okay. We're going to end their show tonight with another call. We're going to go to 304 area code. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. We're going to let you close it out. What's on your mind tonight?
Well, good evening, Joe and Doug. It's I listened to Dave Hodges last night with his guest, and I'll tell you what, that lady is dynamite. I hope you guys listen to that.
Yeah, she was on our show last, about 4 or 5 months ago.
I'll check, but Deborah Tavares.
I might have missed it, but I'll tell you what, she was, yeah.
She can come back on any time. In fact, we
should get a hold of her.
We will contact her. What struck you most about last night's show with Deborah?
It was just, she just puts out her. I mean, so many weapons are formed against us. It's like, and if you look at it, we're dead ducks. But people, we would have been dead ducks a long time ago if that was the way it was supposed to be.
Right.
You know what? And we should praise our God every day that He allows us one more day to be here together. Because, I mean, if it was supposed to be that way, it would have been that way already. And it's going to be bad. Don't get me wrong. And I don't know how we're going to survive, but I just know that there are going to be some that survive.
Well, you know what, caller? I had a conversation with our intelligence inside source. We were talking about the situation in Syria and of course in Iraq, and I made this statement. Well, so many men and women, servicemen and women, died, were killed really for nothing. And he said, "Wait a minute, no. That bought time. And time is important when you're talking about eternal salvation, and when you're talking about the lives of men, women, and children. There's something to be said about buying time. And so I'm glad you brought that point out, caller.
Well, I just really appreciate all that you guys do, and I just always like to, try to help as best I can. Anyway,
we appreciate the support. Any way we get it, whether it's prayers, whether it's spreading the word about the show, the support is so greatly appreciated. We can't even express how much it helps us.
Well, it's it's just like everybody's being pulled together. I know I listened to John Moore a little bit, and he's been talking to Dave Hodges, and it's just like you got these different groups just kind of just through mutual protection. You're wanting to be in contact with each other and wanting to know what's going on in that part of the world or this part of the world, and it's you guys are part of my eyes that I see in the world, and Steve Quayle and the Hawk and Alex Jones, and I try to get a little bit from all of you. Gerald Salente, he was on Coast to Coast last night.
There's a lot of great people out there, and we have to stick together as Christians, as humans, as Americans. We too often find ourselves divided by lines that are thrown out there by the mainstream media, by those dividing lines, and instead I wish it was so much easier said than done, but if we could just unite under what we have in common rather than being divided on what we disagree on, things would go so much easier. And we are still here. We have time left, and we've been given this time for a reason. And we have to use it wisely.
Yeah, and it's just, and I just say we need to count our blessings because they happen all the time. And we are faced with, say, a foe that's coming down with great wrath. And if you don't see that, I can't tell you. People want to bury their head in the sand. It's like, great wrath. I think you're seeing it. And that's the whole point.
And this is something else that people who don't understand this, and there will be people who will mock this, but we saw Katrina take out a good portion of the Gulf states, and it was interesting that roughly the same amount of land affected by Katrina was the same amount of land that Israel were forced to give up, the Gush Katif region of Israel. And I look at this particular storm system now today, and I look at Kerry's whirlwind trip across, to Israel and to Saudi Arabia, and it makes me wonder, are we seeing a replay perhaps of Katrina? So that was just my thought, and I didn't mean to take up your time.
What if I understand, but if like you said, well, I'm sitting in the same position. I'm here in the cold, and I'm worried about if the lights go off. I've got my flashlight sitting beside me. I got my plan. My plan is to get in my car and go up to my brother's house because I really don't have a way to heat it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I know we only have 1 minute left, but going out to the car today, going from the house to the car, it was so cold that once I got in that car, even though it was sitting out in the cold, it was so much warmer than being exposed to that air. So you will have time, even if the power goes out, before things would get really bad in that house.
Oh, I know. But you just got to be concerned with other people. I'm still pretty young and strong. So
absolutely. Well, caller, God bless you. Thank you for taking us out.
God bless you guys.
Tonight. Folks, that'll do it for this edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. I just want to say thank you all for everything you do for us, your kind words of support, your letters, your emails, your packages that you've sent, your guest suggestions. Thank you for everything.
Tomorrow night, we'll have Stan Dale with us for the second hour. And Wednesday, if you didn't hear us earlier or joined us late, Scott Stevens will be with us on Wednesday for the first 2 hours. Until then, stay warm, stay safe, and God bless. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Good night.